Welcome, weary traveller, to Sleepy Scrolls. Tonight we revisit one of the darkest chapters in Tamriel's long history, a time when the veil between worlds tore open and fire rained from the sky. This is the story of the Oblivion Crisis, a cataclysm that marked the end of an era and the beginning of something entirely new. In the final days of the Third Era, the Empire of Tamriel stood proud but tired. Ruled for over 400 years by the descendants of Emperor Septim, the Septim dynasty had weathered rebellions, Daedric plots, and wars long past. At its center sat the aged Emperor Uriel Septim VII, a man whose wisdom was matched only by the burdens he carried. But few knew that within the shadows of his own empire, a cult had taken root, silent, patient, and fanatical. They called themselves the Mythic Dawn. Their doctrine was simple. The world, as it is, must be destroyed. They believed that Tamriel itself was a prison, and only destruction would set it free. Their master, the Daedric prince, Mehrunes Dagon, the god of destruction, ambition, and change. And so, on a quiet morning in the year 433, they struck. The emperor was assassinated, the sacred amulet of kings lost, and with it, the ancient covenant of Kvatch. The divine seal that had, for millennia, protected the mortal world from Daedric invasion was broken. Across Tamriel, the air began to shift. The sky grew red. The veil between Mundus and Oblivion began to thin. And soon, the gates opened. Not just one, not two, but dozens. And then hundreds, each one a jagged tear in the fabric of reality. From them poured the legions of Oblivion, the cruel, the burning, the unrelenting. This was not a war fought between nations. It was not a war of politics or power. This was survival. But amid the chaos, hope endured. A prisoner, nameless and forgotten, would rise to become a hero. A hidden heir, born in secret, would step forward to bear the weight of a dying dynasty. And from the ashes of fallen cities, a last stand would be made, not for empire or glory, but for the soul of the world itself. In this tale, we will walk the crumbling roads of Cyrodiil. We'll stand among the ruins of Kvatch, gaze upon the blazing skies of Bruma, and follow the footsteps of the last Septim, Martin, as he carves a path through prophecy and peril. We'll learn how the crisis began, how it nearly consumed every province of Tamriel, and how, in the end, it was silence, not swords, that brought it to a close. So find a place to rest, let your thoughts slow, and let the story begin. In the final nights of the Third Era, a foreboding calm settled over Tamriel, the last calm before chaos. The event that followed is remembered as one of the most cataclysmic in history, an upheaval so great it brought the Third Era to a fiery end. The High Elves would come to call it the Great Anguish, and the devotees of a dark cult knew it as the Time of Gates. In this calm, reflective retelling, we will wander through the Oblivion Crisis, as if guiding a weary traveller through a half-remembered dream. Let us step quietly into the dusk of an era where legends and terror entwine. To understand the Oblivion Crisis, we must first set the stage. For over 4 centuries, Tamriel had been united under the Third Empire of the Septim dynasty, founded by the legendary Emperor Septim, Talos, at the end of the Second Era. The Septim emperors were dragonborn, blessed by the god Kvatch, and by ancient covenant their rule and the magical dragonfires they kept lit maintained a ward against Daedric. By 433, the empire was led by Uriel Septim VII, a venerable ruler who had weathered many storms, such as the Imperial Simulacrum Crisis decades earlier, and restored stability to the provinces. However, all was not well beneath the surface. Uriel's legitimate sons, Crown Prince Geldal and his brothers Enman and Ebel, were the only known heirs, and unrest simmered in distant provinces where imperial authority had begun to wane. Crucially, a secretive cult known as the Order of the Mythic Dawn had been quietly plotting the empire's downfall. The Mythic Dawn were fervent worshippers of Mehrunes Dagon, the Daedric prince whose spheres are destruction and ambition. Their leader, Mankar Cameron, was an Altmer, high elf, of enigmatic background. Lore suggests he was the illegitimate son of the infamous Cameron Usurper, a long-dead rebel king who once nearly conquered western Tamriel. Mankar authored the commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes, preaching a doctrine that Tamriel was a prison created by the gods and that Dagon would liberate it. To the Mythic Dawn, the coming Oblivion Crisis was a holy event. The long-prophesied Day of Reckoning, when the barriers protecting Mundus would fall and the Daedra would remake the world. The cult operated in shadows, recruiting members through secrecy and zeal. They hid in plain sight with false identities, circulated Mankar's commentaries as coded literature, and waited for the right moment. Emperor Uriel VII, for his part, had premonitions of danger. It is said in the weeks before his death, Uriel's dreams had grown dark. He foresaw his own demise and a coming storm from Oblivion. He confided in his blade's bodyguards of visions of strange gates opening and demons pouring out. In response, the Elder Council and the Blades increased security around the Emperor and his heirs. But it would not be enough. In the late hours of 27th Last Seed, 3 E433, the unthinkable happened at the heart of the Empire. On that night, Emperor Uriel Septim VII's 3 sons were murdered by Mythic Dawn assassins in their beds, eliminating the known Septim bloodline in one coordinated strike. Foreseeing his own imminent fate, Uriel Septim urgently arranged to flee the imperial palace under the protection of a small cadre of his elite Blades bodyguards. Among them were Captain Renaud, Glenroy, and Borus, loyal warriors sworn to give their lives for the dragonborn emperor. Uriel and his escort escaped into a secret passage, a hidden route beneath the imperial city's prison, just as Mythic Dawn agents attacked. By fate or providence, the path led through the prison cell of an unknown prisoner, a person who would soon become pivotal to Tamriel's survival. Uriel mysteriously recognized the prisoner from his dreams and insisted this stranger accompany them. Together, the group delved into the dank catacombs with the Mythic Dawn in pursuit. In the tunnels, torches guttered and steel clashed as the cultists ambushed the party repeatedly. One by one, the blades fell to the assassins' daggers. First, Captain Renaud was slain in a sudden assault, then Glenroy as he held the rear guard. Cornered in the subterranean sanctum, with only one blade left standing, Uriel realized the hour of destiny had come. Accepting his fate, Uriel Septim VII did not cower. Instead of panic, the old emperor found clarity. He used his final moments to entrust the Amulet of Kings, the red-jeweled pendant symbolizing the divine covenant of protection, to the prisoner. "Take this. Deliver it to Joffrey," he urged, naming the Grandmaster of the Blades who could be trusted to find the last Septim heir. Uriel addressed the prisoner with uncanny calm, declaring that their destiny was entwined with the coming battle for Tamriel's future. His final command rang through the chamber. "Find him, and close shut the jaws of Oblivion." These were the Emperor's final words. An assassin's blade found its mark moments later, and Uriel Septim VII, the last crowned dragonborn of the Septim line, collapsed lifeless to the cold stone floor. The Amulet of Kings, Tamriel's most sacred artifact, tumbled from the dying emperor's neck into the care of the stranger. In the silence that followed, the emperor's lone surviving guard, a blade named Borus, grieved over his liege. The Mythic Dawn agents melted away into the dark, but their deed was done. The dragonfires in the Temple of the One, which had burned with holy flame through all the years of Uriel's reign, flickered and died. At that very moment, an ancient divine covenant was broken. The pact between the Dragonborn rulers and the divine Akatosh. For as long as memory, the amulet and the dragonfires had been more than symbols. They were the mystical lock binding the demonic realms of Oblivion away from the mundane world. Only a true heir of Alessia's blood, bearing the amulet, could ignite those dragonfires each generation and renew the covenant of Akatosh, an oath sworn in the dawn of the First Era that protected Nirn from the Daedra. Now, with Uriel and his known heirs slain and the amulet of kings stolen into the night, the white gold tower's eternal flame was snuffed out. For the first time in millennia, the barriers between worlds weakened. In the chill pre-dawn hours following the Emperor's assassination, a strange hush fell over Cyrodiil. It was as if the whole empire held its breath. Then, reality itself began to fray. Far above the Imperial city, thunderheads gathered unnaturally fast, veiling the stars. The air grew heavy with the smell of sulfur. In the distance, a peal of thunder rolled. Or was it a roar? Without the dragonfires, the liminal barrier between Mundus and Oblivion collapsed, and Mehrunes Dagon seized his moment. Across the land, shimmering rents in the fabric of the world started to appear like blood-red wounds in the sky. These were the Oblivion gates, doorways to the Daedric realm of chaos and destruction. One by one, they materialized in eerie silence, then burst open with fire and howling wind. Through them poured Dagon's legions, the Daedra, cruel, otherworldly beings of flame, flesh and spite. They came in many dreadful forms. Clanfear with their horned crests, reptilian Daedroths, flame Atronachs swirling like living fire, and the hulking, armored Dremora, who served as Dagon's dark soldiers. Farmers in the fields looked up to find the sky suddenly torn and burning. Traders on moonlit roads heard the distant clash of metal and the guttural cries of monsters in the night. It was happening everywhere, all at once. The Empire of Tamriel shuddered as word began to spread. The realm of Oblivion was spilling into the mortal world. In the turmoil immediately after the Emperor's fall, the Imperial Legion struggled to respond. With no Emperor on the Ruby Throne, the Elder Council in the Imperial City attempted to maintain order, but panic was rising. The sudden absence of leadership was keenly felt, not only politically, but cosmically. In city chapels and wayside shrines, people gathered to pray for deliverance. In the Imperial City's Chapel of Talos, priests found themselves overwhelmed by crowds of terrified citizens, all kneeling and beseeching the Nine for guidance. For generations, the Empire had been protected by the shadow of the Red Dragon throne, and now that shadow was gone. As Oblivion gates multiplied, fear and confusion gripped the provinces. Yet in those first hours, few could grasp the scale of what was unfolding. Only the blind hermits and prophets of doom seemed to nod knowingly, as if to say, "It is begun." The Oblivion Crisis, as history would name it, had been set in motion by mortal treachery and divine absence. Tamriel was now at the mercy of princes and demons. As the crisis erupted, no corner of Tamriel was spared. Though the main theatre of war would be Cyrodiil, gates to Oblivion opened in every province, and each faced its own nightmares in those early days. Imagine, for a moment, soaring above the continent on a midnight breeze. Below, you would see pockets of hellfire dotting the landscape, like smouldering embers on a vast map. From the high fjords of Skyrim to the steaming marshes of Black Marsh, Tamriel's peoples woke to find the Daedra at their doorstep. The onslaught was not uniform. Some lands suffered more than others. but all felt the tremors of this world-shattering event. In some places, the Daedra were met with stalwart resistance. In others, with confusion and calamity. As Oblivion gates materialized all across Tamriel, one of the first and most harrowing strikes fell upon the province of Cyrodiil itself, at the city of Kvatch. Kvatch was a fair-sized city perched atop a hill in the Gold Coast of Cyrodiil, not far from the Great Forest, known for its grand cathedral of Akatosh and the snow-capped Colovian highlands on its horizon. On a normal night, the bell towers of Kvatch would ring the evening prayer and the lights of hundreds of windows would glow warmly across the valley. But on this night, Kvatch would be transformed into a crucible of fire and fear. The attack on Kvatch was not random, it was deliberate and strategic. Unknown to most, the Emperor's last surviving son, Martin Septim, lived in Kvatch in hiding, a humble priest of Akatosh serving in the city's chapel. The Mythic Dawn, having accomplished the assassination of Uriel, now sought to eliminate this final heir and extinguish the Dragonblood completely. To Mehrunes Dagon's forces, Kvatch became target number one. Deep past midnight, when the world was darkest and most silent, the assault on Kvatch began. Without warning, the sky tore open just outside the city gates. 3 Oblivion gates erupted into being, their jagged maws vomiting Daedra onto the moonlit hills. An alarm bell clanged frantically from Kvatch's watchtowers as guards on the walls peered out to see not an invading army of this world, but a vision from their worst nightmares. Scamps and clanfears swarmed up the winding road, lit by the hellish glow of the portals behind. The Kvatch city guard, led by stout Captain Savlian Matthias, rushed to man the barricades at the gate. Panic and confusion spread through the city as townsfolk were jolted awake by screams and the strange, sulphurous red light in the sky. Moments later, a deafening crack split the night. A great Oblivion gate forced itself open, a portal far larger than the others. From this yawning gateway emerged a monstrosity of war. The Daedric siege crawler, a gigantic siege engine, like a walking metal behemoth wreathed in flame. With thunderous steps, it advanced on Kvatch's walls. The city guard's arrows pattered harmlessly off its demon-forged armor. In a matter of minutes, the siege crawler smashed through Kvatch's outer defenses as if they were parchment. The gates of Kvatch fell, and Dagon's hordes poured into the streets. What followed was pure chaos. By the light of burning homes and towers, Daedra swarmed the city. Spider-legged scamps leapt upon unarmed villagers. Dremora knights cut down fleeing guards. Flame Atronachs set timber-framed houses ablaze with a flick of their fiery limbs. The peaceful city was transformed into a vision of hell. Kvatch's citizens, roused from their beds, ran in every direction seeking escape. Some managed to slip out a postern door and down the hillside into the night, becoming refugees on the Gold Road. Others, unfortunately, ran straight into the Daedra in the streets. Within an hour, much of Kvatch was engulfed in an inferno. The crackling of flames mingled with unearthly shrieks. Over it all, the great chapel of Akatosh at the city's centre tolled its bells in alarm, a desperate summons for any survivors to seek sanctuary. Many did. As fire rained from the sky and stone buildings crumbled, dozens of townsfolk, men, women, and children, barricaded themselves inside the chapel of Akatosh, huddling beneath the statues of the divines and the stained glass image of the dragon god. Among them was Brother Martin, the priest, who did everything he could to calm and protect his flock amid the terror. They barred the chapel doors, and outside they could hear the guttural laughter of Daedra and the screams of their friends. The chapel's sturdy stone walls and Akatosh's altar provided a temporary haven, but it was only a matter of time before the Daedra would force their way in. By dawn, Kvatch was a blackened ruin occupied by Daedric forces. Nearly the entire city had been razed in that single night of horror. Kvatch became the first major city in Tamriel to be utterly destroyed in the Oblivion Crisis. The sun's first light revealed a choking haze of smoke over the hill, and the once proud Castle Kvatch now stood with its ramparts shattered and its banners torn, fluttering weakly over a scene of devastation. Few were left alive in the city proper by morning. The Daedra stalked the smouldering streets, hunting any last survivors. Inside the chapel of Akatosh, the survivors huddled in fearful silence, the air thick with incense and soot. They could hear the guttural voices of Dremora outside, taunting them. For the moment, the Daedra seemed content to leave that one building alone, perhaps wary of the holy ground, and consolidate their hold on the rest of Kvatch. The siege crawler had done its job and retreated back into the Great Gate, which then closed, vanishing and leaving a ghastly stillness. Only one lesser Oblivion Gate remained gaping just outside Kvatch's walls, like an open wound in reality. The Mythic Dawn kept that gate active intentionally, to prevent any counterattack or reinforcement from reclaiming the city. And so, the ruin of Kvatch smouldered and the Daedra prowled as the sun climbed higher. The first battle in the war had been a resounding victory for the forces of Oblivion. Kvatch's fall sent shockwaves throughout Cyrodiil. An entire city wiped off the map in a night. The news spread by those who had escaped. Kvatch is lost. Kvatch is lost. It was a phrase of dread on every tongue, a realization that nowhere, not even the heart of the Empire, was safe from this nightmare. And yet, even in this darkest moment, the seeds of hope had been sown, carried on the boots of a single traveller, and burning in the soul of an unknowing heir. As Kvatch burned, help was already on the way. The Emperor's strange saviour, that anonymous prisoner to whom Uriel Septim had entrusted the Amulet of Kings, had made haste out of the imperial city. Heeding the Emperor's final charge and the advice of Borus, the Emperor's last remaining bodyguard, the prisoner fled the sewers and made for the quiet cloisters of Waynon Priory. There, hidden in plain sight among the monks, dwelled Grandmaster Joffrey of the Blades, a man of stern wisdom and unwavering loyalty. To him, the Amulet of Kings was entrusted, and in turn, the prisoner was entrusted with purpose. Joffrey revealed what had been long kept secret, that Uriel Septim's last surviving heir, a priest named Martin, lived humbly in the city of Kvatch. With no time to spare, the Grandmaster armed the traveller with steel and knowledge alike. The monks gave freely what they could: simple provisions, a blade, and even the gift of a horse from Prior Maberil, whose faith in the prisoner's cause ran deeper than blood. And so, with destiny at their back and a storm rising on the western horizon, the prisoner turned toward Kvatch. Carrying the weight of Uriel's final plea, the hero, for we shall call them the hero of Kvatch, though they had not earned that title yet, arrived at Kvatch's outskirts in the immediate aftermath of the attack. What they found was a scene out of the worst of apocalyptic prophecies. The city of Kvatch aflame, with panicked refugees camped along the roadside below, tending wounds and mourning losses. The sky above Kvatch's hill was still an unnatural crimson, lit by the hellish portal that continued to hang just outside the city gates. On that ashen dawn, Captain Savlian Matthias and a handful of his surviving guards had regrouped at a makeshift barricade down the hill from Kvatch's main gate. Though exhausted and grief-stricken from the night's defeat, Savlian refused to abandon the city completely. He was determined to rescue any survivors, and if possible, reclaim Kvatch from the Daedra. But the remaining Oblivion Gate blocked any approach. Anyone who tried to pass the city gates was met by fresh Daedric reinforcements pouring out of the portal. It was at this critical juncture that the hero arrived and introduced themselves to Savlian. Here was a newcomer, not a soldier, just a stranger, with unusual resolve in their eyes, volunteering to do what no one else could: venture inside the gate and close it from within. Perhaps Savlian was too desperate to refuse. Perhaps he saw in the hero a spark of the divine. Either way, he agreed. The heroes steeled themselves, gripped their weapon tightly, and stepped into the swirling maw of the Oblivion Gate, disappearing into the infernal beyond. Inside, the hero found themselves in a hellish landscape of the Deadlands, Dagon's Plain of Oblivion, all volcanic rock, ashen soil, and rivers of lava under a bleeding sky. Towering spiked towers and ruined shrines dotted the fiery wasteland. It was a lethal environment where every step was haunted by Daedric foes. Nimble scamps, ferocious Campfire, and armoured Dromora warriors, all eager to kill the mortal intruder. Fighting through the demonic hordes in that pocket of oblivion, the hero pressed toward the centre of the invaded sector. A tall sigil tower that loomed over the Deadlands' horizon. These towers were the dark heart of each Oblivion Gate, anchoring the portals to Nirn. Braving fire and storm, the hero entered the tower, climbing its perilous ramps while battling Dromora guards inside. At the tower's summit, crackling with arcane energy, lay the sigil stone, a glowing orb of magical power that sustained the gate between worlds. With fearless determination, the hero of Kvatch seized the sigil stone from its pedestal. In that instant, the gate's magic was unbound. The connection between realms collapsed, and the Oblivion Gate outside Kvatch exploded inward upon itself. The hero was hurled back to Nirn as the fiery portal imploded, leaving behind only scorched ground and a swirling vortex of embers where the gate had stood. Captain Savlian Matthias and his men let out a cheer of astonished relief. They surged forward now, entering Kvatch through the ruined gates unopposed. The ground was littered with spent magicka and Daedric ashes. Together with the hero, the remaining guards moved street by street, fighting the few Daedra left inside the city. The battle for Kvatch's remnants was brief but fierce. In the broken market square, the hero and guards cut down a knot of scamps picking through the debris. By the city well, they duelled a towering Dromora kinmarcher and finally dispatched him. Soon they reached the plaza before the chapel of Akatosh, where a cluster of snarling Daedra were trying to batter down the chapel's heavy oak doors. A coordinated charge scattered these creatures. Clanfears fell to arrows and swords. A storm Atranash dissipated under the hero's decisive strike. Savlian himself struck the final blow on the last Dromora, avenging his fallen comrades with grim satisfaction. Then, with hearts pounding, the rescuers threw open the chapel doors and rushed inside. What they found must have been a scene both grievous and blessed. Dozens of haggard survivors crowded in pews, eyes wide with disbelief that help had come. Among them was Brother Martin, face soot-streaked and eyes shining with tears of gratitude as he cradled an injured child. Savlian called out that the city was momentarily clear of Daedra. They had won this small reprieve. A cheer, half sob and half laughter, rose from the beleaguered crowd. Martin Septim, though he did not yet know his true lineage, emerged into the dawn light with the others, witnessing the devastation of Kvatch with utter sorrow. He had prayed through the night at Akatosh's altar for a miracle, and in a way, one had arrived. A stranger had saved them, and the Daedra were gone. In the hours that followed, the hero humbly revealed to Martin the truth, that he was Uriel Septim's son and last heir, and that the dragon blood lived in him. One can only imagine Martin's astonishment and inner turmoil. He had lived a quiet life of service, never knowing his royal blood, and now the world had literally ended around him to bring him to this moment. With Kvatch's survivors gathered and the fires dying down, Martin agreed to accompany the hero to the safety of Waynon Priory, where Joffrey and the Blades awaited. There was nothing left for him in Kvatch now but ruins and graves. By noon that day, A somber procession of survivors, Martin among them, descended the hill away from their destroyed home. They were battered, grieving, yet alive. Behind them, Kvatch's once proud skyline was now a broken silhouette against the sky. But above, the cruel red clouds had begun to recede, giving way to the pale blue of a new day. The hero of Kvatch had given the Empire its first ray of hope by closing that gate. The first recorded closure of an Oblivion gate by mortal hands. And by saving Martin Septim, the last ember of the Dragonfire legacy. News of this deed spread almost as fast as the tales of Kvatch's fall. Whispers in surviving camps spoke of a stranger who braved Oblivion itself and returned victorious. For the first time, the Daedra had been defeated in battle, however small, and made to retreat. The importance of Martin's survival was not yet widely understood by the public, but to the Blades and those who learned of it, it meant the Covenant of Akatosh might yet be restored. A Dragonborn still lived. There was someone who could relight the Dragonfires and seal Mundus from Oblivion once more, if properly aided and protected. The Mythic Dawn's advantage was no longer absolute. The crisis was far from over. Indeed, many more battles and sacrifices lay ahead before the gates of Oblivion would finally be shut for good. But the early stages of the Oblivion Crisis had reached a turning point. The initial shock and awe of Mehrunes Dagon's onslaught had been met with resilience, courage, and sacrifice from each of Tamriel's peoples. In that soft morning after the Battle of Kvatch, with the broken city still smouldering, there was a sense that the darkest night might eventually give way to dawn. The survivors, weary and wrapped in blankets, looked eastward as the sunlight broke through cloud. Perhaps some offered quiet thanks to Akatosh for delivering them. Tamriel had been shaken to its core, but it was not yet conquered. As you close your eyes and drift, picture the ruins of Kvatch cooling in the gentle light of dawn. Amid the ashen streets, a few green shoots of hope are already poking up, symbolized by a priest-turned-heir and a nameless hero walking side by side down the hillside. The Dragonfires are dark, but a Dragonborn walks the earth. The jaws of Oblivion, once gaping open, have been pried shut at least for a moment, and in that moment, all those who yet live can find the strength to carry on into whatever tomorrow brings. Dawn's light crept over the hills as the hero of Kvatch guided Brother Martin away from the still smouldering ruins of his city. The great Oblivion Gate that had torn Kvatch asunder was now closed. A victory hard won amid ashes and loss. In the early morning haze, a sullen red glow clung to distant horizons, and the acrid scent of sulphur hung in the air, haunting reminders that other Daedric fires still burned across the land. If Kvatch could be reduced to cinders in a single night, what corner of Cyrodiil could truly be called safe? Martin Septim, gentle priest-turned-heir, walked in a pensive silence, grappling with the revelation of his royal blood and the destruction of all he'd known. From time to time, he whispered prayers to Akatosh under his breath, seeking solace and strength from the dragon god of time as he tried to steady himself. By his side strode the hero, already being hailed by some as the hero of Kvatch, ever vigilant against unseen dangers. The road ahead was fraught with uncertainty. Mythic Dawn agents could lurk in any thicket or roadside shadow, and the terrors of Oblivion could burst forth again without warning. Travelers on the Gold Road watched the pair with a mix of awe and fear. Whispers trailed in their wake, rumors that the last son of Uriel Septim lived, shepherded by a mysterious savior from Kvatch. Though few dared speak Martin's name aloud, hope kindled in secret hearts that the blood of dragons still ran in the world of mortals. Yet fear was ever present. In roadside inns and village squares, the news of Kvatch's fall spread like wildfire. At a wayside tavern, an ashen-faced refugee recounted how the sky opened and demons poured forth, warning that no city is truly safe. City guards from Skingrad to Anvil doubled their patrols, peering nervously at every storm cloud as if it might birth another gate to the Deadlands. Even the imperial city, heart of the empire, was on edge. The usual bustle of merchants and beggars now subdued by talk of dark portents and an unseen enemy. In these early days of the crisis, the people of Cyrodiil grappled with the impossible. Oblivion itself had violated their world, and the shining legions of Daedra had shown themselves in open war. All eyes turned to the dragonfires, now cold, and to the vacant ruby throne. Without an emperor who would rally the realm against the coming darkness, the faint glimmer of hope lay in the whispers of an illegitimate heir, spirited away from Kvatch's wreckage. And so, as the hero and Martin pressed eastward toward Sanctuary, the fate of an empire travelled with them, fragile as a candle in a tempest. By early afternoon, the spire of Waynham Priory's chapel rose into view above the trees. Waynham Priory had long been a quiet refuge of the Blades, a place where Grandmaster Joffrey and a handful of monks tended to both prayer and the Empire's secrets. The sight of its stone walls should have promised safety. Instead, Martin and the hero arrived to chaos. A bell tolled urgently in the Priory's courtyard, and panicked shouts rang out over the clamour of clashing steel. Thin plumes of smoke curled from the stables, and the smell of burning hay filled the air. The tranquil sanctuary had become a battleground. Mythic Dawn assassins, agents of the very cult that orchestrated the Emperor's murder, had chosen this moment to strike. They descended upon Waynham Priory in secret, intent on eliminating Brother Martin and stealing the Amulet of Kings in one fell swoop. As the hero rushed through the gate, they beheld a grim scene. One of Waynham's peaceful monks lay slain upon the cobblestones, and near the chapel steps Grandmaster Joffrey, robes singed and face set in determination, was locked in combat with a pair of crimson-robed attackers. Though greying and clad as a humble monk, Joffrey fought with the ferocity of a veteran blade. An Akaviri katana flashed in his hands as he parried the cultists' daggers and struck back with lethal skill. Seeing the Grandmaster hard-pressed, the hero drew their own weapon and leapt into the fray. Steel met steel amid the ivy-clad walls and holy statues as the hero of Kvatch and the old blade stood shoulder to shoulder against the assassins. In a swift but fierce skirmish, they dispatched the remaining Mythic Dawn agents, the last cultist collapsing at the feet of the very chapel he had sought to defile. When the din of battle finally ceased, a heavy silence fell over the priory. The only sound was Martin's hurried footsteps as he ran up the path to join them, concern etched on his face. Joffrey's first thought, even before tending his wounds or mourning his fallen brethren, was of the Amulet of Kings. With a dread urgency, he beckoned the hero to follow and sprinted into the priory's old stone house. They took the stairs two at a time to Joffrey's quarters under the eaves, where he had hidden the amulet for safekeeping. The cupboard where the sacred jewel had been stored hung open, its lock shattered. Books and parchments were scattered across the floor as if in frantic search. Joffrey's worst fear was realized. The Amulet of Kings was gone. In the heat of the attack, a Mythic Dawn agent had slipped inside and snatched the Empire's most sacred relic from under their noses. For a moment, Joffrey stood in stunned silence, the reality setting in like a physical blow. The Amulet of Kings, the last symbol of the Covenant of Akatosh, gifted by the dragon god to Saint Alessia ages ago, had protected Tamriel from the Daedric hordes for centuries. It was this amulet, kindled by each new emperor in the dragonfires of the imperial city, that sealed the gates of Oblivion. Now it was stolen, carried off by those who sought to destroy the very barriers between worlds. The old blade nearly despaired as the weight of centuries of duty suddenly slipped from his grasp. In minutes, the final token of divine protection was lost to enemy hands. But Martin's gentle voice broke through Joffrey's anguish. He placed a hand on the Grandmaster's shoulder, reminding him that all was not lost. The true hope for Tamriel still lived, standing right beside them. Martin Septim himself was the embodiment of that hope, and while he drew breath, the fight against Mehrunes Dagon could not be forsaken. Joffrey drew a deep breath and nodded, resolve hardening in his eyes. With the amulet gone, protecting Martin had become more critical than ever. "We must get the heir to safety," he declared. "Cloud Ruler Temple." The words came resolute and certain. It was the only place in Cyrodiil fortified enough to shelter the last Septim against the forces of Oblivion. High in the Gerald Mountains near Bruma stood Cloud Ruler Temple, ancient stronghold of the Blades. "A few men can hold it against an army," Joffrey said, repeating the old boast of the fortress. Without delay, the Grandmaster gathered what supplies and surviving acolytes he could. With Brother Martin in their care, the party departed the stricken priory at once, leaving the quiet dead to their rest and carrying with them the last light of the Septim line. Cloud Ruler Temple, perched high in the snowy Gerald Mountains north of Bruma, had served as a secret refuge for the Empire's guardians for centuries. After a hard ride through wilderness trails and steep, winding mountain paths, the weary trio, Martin, Joffrey, and the hero, arrived at its gates by nightfall. The sight that greeted them was awe-inspiring. Nestled atop a rocky crag with a commanding view of the valleys below, Cloud Ruler Temple loomed out of the dusk like a vision from an older, nobler time. Its design was unmistakably Akaviri, harkening back to the heritage of the Dragon Guard. High stone walls and elegant tiered eaves crowned the fortress, and tall watchtowers stood at the corners, their beacon fires flickering against the twilight sky. The sharp scent of mountain pine mixed with the cold air as they approached the main gates. True to Joffrey's promise, the stronghold looked ready to repel an army, if need be, its walls thick, its ramparts lined with vigilant sentries. In ages past, whenever the Empire was threatened or the Dragonborn emperors were in peril, the Blades had spirited them to this very sanctuary. Now, at the end of the Third Era, Cloud Ruler Temple would once again shelter a Septim heir in time of crisis. As they climbed at the final steps, a company of Blades warriors emerged to meet them, alerted by riders sent ahead. These battle-hardened knights, sworn to the Dragon Banner, could not contain their astonishment at the sight of Martin Septim, the lost heir, walking alive among them. In a moment, thick with emotion, Joffrey stepped forward and presented Martin to his fellow Blades. The warriors drew their katanas in unison and raised them high, the lamplight gleaming on Akaviri steel. As one, they saluted the new Dragonborn with an ancient cry. "Hail, Dragonborn! Hail, Martin Septim!" The night air echoed with the reverence in their voices. Martin, overwhelmed by this sudden honor, managed a humble reply. He assured them he would do his duty as their lord, and thanked each of them for their loyalty and courage. In that simple, earnest speech, the soft-spoken priest of Kvatch fully assumed the mantle of a leader. His humility and resolve endeared him to the Blades at once, and every knight present silently vowed to protect Martin with their very lives. Inside the temple's great hall, the new arrivals were greeted by the warmth of roaring hearths and the comforting smell of spiced wine. At last, Martin had a moment to breathe. The weight of recent events pressed heavily on him. But here, at Cloud Ruler, surrounded by the elite protectors of his line, he found a brief respite. As torches cast dancing shadows on the carved wood pillars, Joffrey and the hero took the opportunity to brief Martin on all that had transpired since Uriel Septim's assassination. In hushed tones, they recounted the Emperor's final moments in the prison depths, the Mythic Dawn's vile plot, the fall of Kvatch, and the desperate scramble to secure Martin and the Amulet of Kings. Martin listened intently, his brow furrowing as each grim detail fell into place. Though gently bred as a man of faith, Martin possessed a keen mind. He was, after all, a trained scholar of theology, with a curiosity for the arcane. He understood all too well the stakes of what they told him. When he learned the amulet was now in enemy hands, Martin's face grew grave. He spoke softly of the Daedric prophecies and occult lore he had studied in the past, piecing together what the Mythic Dawn might be planning. He speculated that the cult's possession of the Amulet of Kings could be more than symbolic. It might be allowing the Daedra to weaken the barrier between worlds, a prelude to an all-out invasion of Tamriel. If Mehrunes Dagon's horde was to be stopped, they would need to recover the amulet and relight the dragonfires in the Temple of the One. Only by re-establishing the Covenant of Akatosh and formally recognizing Martin as Emperor could the tide of oblivion be turned. It was a daunting realization. Everything depended on reclaiming that single jewel from the clutches of the Mythic Dawn. That night, as Martin settled into the safety of the fortress, and the Blades stood watch under the cold stars, a council of war convened in Cloud Ruler's map room. Joffrey, the hero, and a few senior Blades spread out maps of Cyrodiil and notes on cult activities by candlelight. Martin, weary but determined to help, offered to begin researching any Daedric lore or magic that might give them an advantage while he remained hidden at the temple. Meanwhile, it was clear that an active hunt for the Mythic Dawn had to begin at once. Joffrey turned to the hero of Kvatch, who had already proven instrumental in delivering Martin safely this far. The task of tracking down the secretive cult and recovering the amulet would fall largely upon their shoulders. Fortunately, they would not have to do it alone. One of Joffrey's most trusted agents was already working on that very mission. Joffrey explained that Borus, one of the surviving Blades from the Emperor's entourage, was currently in the Imperial City gathering information on the assassins. Borus had been with Uriel Septim during the fateful escape through the prison and had barely survived the ordeal. He was now burning with purpose to avenge the fallen Emperor and unmask those behind the plot. In the days since, Borus managed to identify the assassins as members of the Mythic Dawn cult and was quietly following their trail in the capital. Now that Martin was safe at Cloud Ruler, the time had come for the hero to join forces with Borus and take the fight to the enemy's shadows. Joffrey gave the hero a firm directive: travel to the Imperial City, find Borus, and work with him to uncover the Mythic Dawn's hidden plans. Their ultimate goal: discover the cult's base of operations, the shrine from which this Oblivion Crisis was being orchestrated, and retrieve the Amulet of Kings. Before the hero departed, Joffrey made a heartfelt offer. In recognition of their valor at Kvatch and Waynun Priory, the hero was invited to formally join the Blades. It was a tradition as old as the Septim line. Those who proved themselves true friends of the Dragonborn could be inducted into the Empire's most trusted order. The hero accepted without hesitation, swearing the oath of allegiance, there in the quiet courtyard under the night sky. In a brief but solemn ceremony, Joffrey presented the hero with a slender Akaviri katana, the elegant curved blade carried by all Blades, and welcomed them as one of their own. The other knights sheathed their swords in salute, acknowledging the hero as a brother in arms. Blades, armor, and supplies were made available, and though the hero would travel light to maintain stealth, they carried with them the strength of an ancient fellowship. With Martin Septim secure behind Cloud Ruler's walls and new allies at their back, the hero of Kvatch set out at first light for the Imperial City to hunt the hidden enemy in the very heart of the Empire. The Imperial City greeted the hero with a chilly autumn breeze and streets abuzz with tension. While Martin was settling in at Cloud Ruler Temple, the hero, now a sworn Blade, arrived in the vast capital to rendezvous with Borus and begin tracking down the Emperor's killers. The bustling districts of the city isle felt different now. Behind the routine chatter of merchants in the market district and the clang of the blacksmith's hammer in the forge, there was an undercurrent of dread. Every citizen had heard whispers of gates to oblivion opening in the wilderness, and of course all knew that the Emperor and his heirs were dead. The city watch patrolled in pairs, and the usual gaiety of the taverns was muted by uncertainty. In this atmosphere, the hero moved discreetly, cloak drawn tight, making their way to the agreed meeting place with Barus. They found Barus in the Elven Gardens district at Luther Broad's boarding house, a modest inn where a Blades agent could blend in with travellers. The two exchanged greetings quietly, relief evident on Barus's face at seeing a friendly ally. He quickly ushered the hero to a private corner. Barus had spent the last days sniffing out Mythic Dawn spies in the city, and he carried grim news. He was being watched. Even as they spoke in hushed tones, Barus's sharp eyes caught a figure lurking by the bar, feigning disinterest. A plan formed between them. The hero would play the oblivious friend, while Barus led the suspected cultist into a trap. Without a word, Barus turned and made his way toward the cellar door, the agent following close behind, and the hero trailing further off. Down in the stillness beneath the tavern, the truth was laid bare. No pretense, no more lies, only steel. The Mythic Dawn assassin struck first, but the two blades were ready. In the cold dark of the basement, the fight was swift and final. When it ended, the cult spy lay dead at their feet. Though this encounter was brief, it confirmed Barus's suspicions. The Mythic Dawn had eyes even here in the Imperial City. On the agent's body, Barus found a copy of Commentaries on the Mysterium Xerxes, Volume 1, the same strange book that had been taken from the assassins in the Imperial prison. It was a clue the Blades already had, but now Barus was certain it was key to unraveling the cult. The hero and Barus knew they needed expert help to decipher the significance of these commentaries. Thus, they set out for the one place in the city where answers to arcane riddles might be found: the Arcane University's Mystic Archives. At the Arcane University, under the pale afternoon sun, the white spires and verdant gardens of the Guild's campus belied the urgency of the hero's errand. In the Mystic Archives, a grand library of ancient tomes and occult knowledge, the hero met with Tamina, an Argonian savant renowned for her expertise in Daedric cults and arcane literature. Tamina's slit-pupilled eyes widened with recognition when presented with the commentaries. The books were known to her by reputation. They were the teachings of none other than Mankar Cameron, the Mythic Dawn's elusive leader. Turning the pages with scaled fingers, Tamina explained that these commentaries on the Mysterium Xerxes, often simply called the Mythic Dawn commentaries, were dense with metaphors and mysticism. Mankar Cameron had written 4 volumes in total, and it was rumoured that within their pages lay hidden secrets. Perhaps even the location of the Mythic Dawn's secret shrine and the key to their plans. However, deciphering such secrets would require the complete set of all 4 books. At present, the Blades only had Volume 1, recovered from the assassins, and a vague idea that more existed. Tamina confirmed that to unravel Mankar's hidden message, they would indeed need all 4 volumes. A daunting task, as these books were rare and largely outlawed. Fortunately, Tamina herself owned Commentaries, Volume 2, and without hesitation, she handed the dusty volume to the hero, lending her aid to the cause. 2 down, 2 to go. For the next volume, Tamina offered a lead: the first edition bookshop in the Market District. Its proprietor, Fintius, was known to deal in rare and esoteric titles. The hero thanked Tamina for her help and made for the Market District's busy avenues. At first edition, sunlight streamed through high windows onto stacks of leather-bound books. Fintius greeted the hero politely, but his eyes narrowed at the mention of the Mythic Dawn commentaries. Indeed, he said, a copy of Volume 3 had passed through his hands, but it was already spoken for. Another customer had paid in advance and asked the book to be held for pickup. Fintius was hesitant to reveal the buyer's identity, bound by his professional discretion. Only after some earnest persuasion and the clink of a few gold coins did he relent and share the name. One, Guinus, an alchemist from out of town. The hero thanked Phintius and decided on a delicate approach. Rather than simply buying the book and leaving, they would wait for this Gwynus to appear, hoping to learn why he sought the book. There might be more to glean about the cult from the would-be buyer. Gwynus arrived not long after, a slight, bookish Bosma man who looked more scholar than conspirator. The hero intercepted him gently outside the shop, striking up a conversation about the commentaries. At first, Gwynus was startled that a stranger knew of his purchase, but the hero's calm demeanor and probing questions soon got him talking. It turned out Gwynus was not a hardened cultist at all, but a curious soul who had stumbled across the writings of Mankar Cameron and, fascinated by their promises of hidden truths, sought to join the Mythic Dawn. He believed obtaining the books was his ticket to initiation, unaware of the cult's true nature. When the hero revealed that the Mythic Dawn were behind the Emperor's assassination and the Oblivion gates ravaging the land, Gwynus's face went ashen. The naive alchemist was horrified. He had never imagined that by seeking enlightenment, he was abetting regicide and apocalypse. Realizing his terrible mistake, Gwynus wanted no part of the cult. Trembling, he not only handed over Commentaries, Volume 3, which he had come to collect, but also produced a crumpled note he had received from a Mythic Dawn sponsor. The note provided instructions for his initiation meeting, the place and time where he was supposed to receive Volume 4 and be welcomed into the cult's ranks. Grateful to have escaped a deadly fate, Gwynus thanked the hero profusely and hurried away into the crowded streets, determined to put as much distance between himself and the Mythic Dawn as possible. The hero was left standing outside First Edition, with Volumes 1, 2, and 3 of the commentaries safely in hand, and more importantly, the sponsor's note that revealed how to obtain the elusive 4th volume. At last, a real breakthrough. The note specified a clandestine meeting to take place in the Imperial City's sunken sewers at midnight, where a Mythic Dawn sponsor would induct new members and hand over Commentaries, Volume 4. This was the cult's recruitment method, and the perfect opportunity for the Blades to strike. The hero knew it was time to reunite with Baurus and lay a trap for the Mythic Dawn's recruiter. Armed with knowledge and the precious books, the hero made their way swiftly back to Baurus's hideout. Under the dim light of a tavern storeroom, the two Blades reviewed the note's details and steeled themselves for what was to come. They had in their possession 3 of Mankar Cameron's 4 commentaries and the key to obtaining the final one. The enemy, once hidden, was now within reach. As the moons rose over the Imperial City, the hero and Baurus prepared to descend into the underbelly of the capital, where the darkness of the Mythic Dawn awaited. Following the lead from Gwynus's note, the hero of Kvatch and Baurus set out for the rendezvous point, the maze-like sewer system beneath the Imperial City's Elven Gardens district. It was near midnight when they slipped through a rusted grate into the subterranean depths. The air down in the sunken sewers was thick with the smell of stagnant water and moss. By the flicker of a single torch, the two navigated tunnels that snaked and twisted through the earth. Vermin skittered in the darkness, fat rats, and the pale, sightless mud crabs that dwelled in the muck. Baurus moved with sure steps. As a former resident of the Imperial City, he knew these forgotten passages well. With each drip of water echoing off stone, they crept closer to the cistern chamber described in the note. At last, they reached a wide, circular cistern deep below the city. The chamber was eerily silent save for the drip of moisture from the curved brick ceiling. Faint torchlight reflected off the dark waters of a central well. This, according to the note, was the appointed place. The hero and Baurus huddled in the shadows of an alcove to confer on their plan. One of them would have to pose as the new recruit to meet the sponsor face to face, while the other provided hidden backup. Baurus was ready to put himself in harm's way, but the hero insisted on taking the lead. After all, they had already gained the cult's trust on paper by intercepting Gwyneth's invitation. And so it was decided. The hero would masquerade as an eager new initiate, sitting alone at the meeting table, while Baurus concealed himself in an adjacent tunnel, bow at the ready. If all went well, they would surprise the sponsor and any accomplices once the final volume was in hand. With a firm clasp on the hero's shoulder, Baurus wished them luck and melted into the darkness. The hero sheathed their weapons to appear less threatening and stepped into the dimly lit opening of the cistern, heart pounding quietly in their chest. Soon, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed down a distant corridor. A tall, hooded figure emerged into the chamber, carrying a small lantern. The hero could feel the figure's eyes appraising them from beneath the cowl. In a low, cordial voice, the newcomer greeted the initiate. "Dawn is breaking," he intoned, a password of the Mythic Dawn. The hero replied in kind, "Welcome, brother," completing the coded greetings that marked them as a believer. Satisfied, the hooded sponsor approached the stone table and sat across from the hero. He pulled back his hood to reveal the refined, sharp features of an Ultima, high elf. His eyes gleamed with a fanatic's light as he spoke of the glorious dawn that Mehrunes Dagon would bring. This was no ordinary recruiter. The hero sensed authority in his bearing. As they conversed in hushed tones, the Ultima sponsor produced commentaries. Volume 4, the final tome, and slid it across the table as promised. In that tense moment, the hero risked a glance into the shadows where Baurus hid, preparing to spring the trap. But the Ultima's instincts were razor-sharp. Perhaps he noticed the hero's brief shift in gaze, or some subtle sign of duplicity. His warm smile faded, and his eyes narrowed shrewdly. "Ah," he said quietly, "I sense there is more to you than meets the eye." In a flash, the sponsor leapt to his feet, casting aside pretense. "Traitors!" he hissed, and with a motion of his hand, signaled unseen allies. From the darkness of the peripheral tunnels, 2 more cultists burst forth, bodyguards who had been lying in wait. In that same instant, Baurus emerged from concealment, sword drawn, shouting a warning. The secret meeting had become an ambush, but not for the blades, as the cultists had intended. It was an ambush for both sides, a deadly surprise in the bowels of the earth. Steel rang against steel as chaos erupted in the sewer chamber. The Ultima sponsor, now wielding a shimmering dagger and crackling spells in his offhand, lunged at the hero with murderous intent. This was no mere recruiter. As the duel commenced, the Ultima's ferocity and skill revealed his true identity. Raven Cameron, none other than Mankar Cameron's own son and a leader of the Mythic Dawn. The hero's suspicions were confirmed when Raven snarled, "So here you are at last, lackey of the false heir," echoing the hatred he bore for Martin Septim's protectors. Meanwhile, the 2 Mythic Dawn bodyguards engaged Baurus, who fought furiously to keep them at bay. The confined space filled with the clash of blades, bursts of flame from spells, and the splashing of disturbed water underfoot. The battle in the darkness was intense and lit only by the flicker of the fallen lantern. The hero parried Raven Cameron's dagger strikes and responded with swift riposts from their Akaviri blade. Raven was a formidable opponent. As a high-ranking assassin of the cult, he combined Ultima sorcery with agile knife work. Snarling an invocation to Dagon, Raven unleashed a bolt of destructive magic that seared the air past the hero's shoulder, exploding against the wall in a shower of sparks. The hero answered with a deft strike of their own, the blade's katana slicing through Raven's robe and drawing blood. Nearby, Baurus dueled one cultist in a desperate dance of swords, while fending off the second with quick jabs of his dagger. The veteran blade was outnumbered, but his training and rage for justice made him fight like a cornered lion. Finally, after a flurry of furious blows, the hero found an opening. With a cry to the 9 on their lips, they drove their sword forward, just as Raven Cameron raised his hand for another spell. The katana pierced the Ultima's defenses and struck true. Raven staggered, a look of shock crossing his face as his lifeblood stained the sewer waters. In the same moment, Boris, wounded but unbowed, managed to impale one of the assassins on his blade, even as the second cultist lunged at him. The hero sprang to Boris's aid, intercepting the remaining zealot with a sweeping slash. Outmatched and suddenly alone, the last cultist fell beneath the combined might of the two blades. When the echoes of combat finally subsided, 3 Mythic Dawn operatives lay dead in the chamber. The 2 bodyguards and Raven Cameron himself. The hero caught their breath, heart pounding with adrenaline, and quickly checked on Boris. The blade was bloodied from a gash along his arm, but alive, and he managed a weary grin of triumph. "That's 3 more that won't report back to their master," Boris muttered, nudging one of the fallen cultists with his boot. Indeed, their victory here had struck a significant blow to the Mythic Dawn. Raven Cameron, the son of Mankar Cameron and a key lieutenant of the cult, was slain. One of the cult's heads had been cut off in the darkness below the Imperial City. On Raven's corpse, the hero found exactly what they had come for. Mythic Dawn Commentaries, Volume 4. This final volume, bound in crimson and gold, was a prize normally reserved only for those deemed worthy of joining the cult's inner circle. That the hero now held it was a testament to their cunning and courage, and Boris's ruse that lured Raven into the open. With volumes 1 through 4 now collected, the pieces of Mankar Cameron's puzzle were finally assembled in one place. These arcane writings, filled with strange riddles and obscure diatribes, were rumoured to conceal the location of the Mythic Dawn's secret shrine and perhaps clues to their ultimate goal. Standing in that damp, torchlit chamber, the hero and Boris knew the tide of their investigation had turned. At last, they held the key that could unveil the enemy's hiding place. Boris grimaced from his wound, but insisted it was just a scratch. He urged the hero to press on with the mission, decipher the commentaries, and find the Mythic Dawn's lair. As a loyal blade, Boris felt his duty now lay in protecting Martin, especially knowing the cult would seek revenge for Raven's death. He volunteered to return at once to Cloud Ruler Temple to aid Joffrey in guarding the heir. The hero agreed, clasping Boris's hand in gratitude for his help and bravery. Under the vaulted stone ceiling of that sewer, they shared a moment of hard-won camaraderie. 2 blades who had avenged their emperor in small measure and gained a vital advantage for the battles yet to come. Boris departed into the night to ride for Cloud Ruler Temple, while the hero made for the Arcane University once more. The final phase of this hunt required scholarly insight and Tarmina's expertise. The Mythic Dawn was about to reveal its secrets. Reunited in the Arcane University's mystic archives, the hero laid out all 4 volumes of the Mythic Dawn commentaries before Tarmina. The Argonian scholar's eyes gleamed with amazement. It was no small feat to collect the complete set of these forbidden books. They immediately set to work, poring over the texts late into the night under the glow of mage lights. At first glance, the commentaries read as convoluted ravings, sermons to Mehrunes Dagon filled with florid language and cryptic allegories. But Tarmina had seen similar tricks in occult writings before. She suspected that within the ramblings there could be hidden messages placed by Mankar Cameron for his cult to discover. Perhaps an acrostic, a code where the first letters of lines or paragraphs spelled out words. Such methods were a known tactic of secret societies. Hour after hour, Tarmina and the hero combed through the volumes. The library was silent save for the turning of pages, and Tarmina's occasional muttering as she traced a clawed finger along a line of text. Strange capitalizations and peculiar turns of phrase began to stand out. Then, Tarmina made a breakthrough. She noticed that the first letter of each paragraph in the commentaries might form a meaningful sequence. Excited, she urged the hero to write down these initial letters from all 4 volumes in order. As they did, a clear message started to emerge from the chaos of letters. Piece by piece, the hidden phrase unveiled itself. Green Emperor Way, where tower touches midday sun. Tamina and the hero paused, considering the cryptic sentence. Green Emperor Way was immediately recognizable. It is the name of the garden promenade encircling the white gold tower, the Imperial Palace, in the Imperial City. This district was essentially a grand cemetery where the tombs of emperors and nobility lay in manicured green courtyards. Where tower touches midday sun, Tamina murmured the words, imagining the white gold tower's great shadow. They realized the clue was directing them to a specific place and time. Something in Green Emperor Way would be revealed at midday, when the sun's light or the tower's shadow reached the right spot. The hero deduced that they must go to the Imperial Palace district at high noon and look for a sign among the tombs. Tamina agreed, her tail swishing with anticipation. This had to be how cult members received the final directions to their secret shrine. She cautioned the hero to be careful and wished them luck. They were on the verge of uncovering the Mythic Dawn's greatest secret. The next day, as the sun climbed toward its zenith, the hero of Kvatch made their way into Green Emperor Way. The white gold tower gleamed overhead, its pale stone spire piercing the blue autumn sky. All was quiet in the gardens. The usual palace guards patrolled at a distance, and a few citizens strolled the paths in reverent respect for the dead buried there. The hero kept a low profile, moving among the ancient tombs and ornate mausoleums that dotted the green. They waited patiently as the shadow of the great tower shortened with the approaching noon. When the sun reached its highest point, a brilliant shaft of light fell directly along the tower's base, causing its shadow to align with a row of tombs on the western lawn. Suddenly, one tomb began to glimmer with an otherworldly illumination. The sepulchre belonged to Prince Tamriel, a lesser-known member of the ancient imperial lineage, whose resting place was marked by a worn stone sarcophagus. Now, under the noonday sun, something extraordinary happened. A hidden glyph on the tomb's face started to glow with a faint red light. The hero stepped closer, heart quickening. As they watched in awe, the glow intensified and resolved into the shape of an engraved map. An etched map of Cyrodiil, appearing as if by magic on the surface of the tomb. It was as if invisible ink had been activated by the sunlight. Upon the map, one location pulsed with special emphasis, a spot high in the northern mountains, far from any city. The hero traced the glowing mark and quickly compared it with their mental knowledge of Cyrodiil's geography. The marked spot corresponded to a remote area in the Gerald Mountains north of Cheydinhal, near an isolated lake. In that instant, the pieces clicked into place. This must be Lake Arius Caverns, a little-known network of caves in the mountains, far from prying eyes. At last, the mysterious lair from which the Mythic Dawn had orchestrated this crisis was found. The cult's secret shrine, referred to obliquely in their texts as the Dawn's Sanctuary, lay hidden within the caverns by Lake Arius. The hero could scarcely believe it. The commentary's riddle had led exactly to this moment, and Mankar Cameron's fanatics had unknowingly provided the means of their own undoing. The hero carefully memorized the location and details as the magical glow began to fade with the passing of midday. By the time the glyph vanished, they were already striding purposefully out of the garden, mind racing with plans. Without delay, messengers were sent, and within hours, Boris and Joffrey hurried to reconvene with the hero at Cloud Ruler Temple. There, in the safety of the Blade's fortress, they spread out a map of Cyrodiil on the great table in the main hall and marked the spot corresponding to Lake Arius Caverns. It was deep in the wilds, high in the Gerald Range close to the border, a perfect place for a hidden cult to thrive unnoticed. With grim satisfaction, The blades realized they finally had their target. Now, they could directly strike at the heart of the enemy that had plunged Tamriel into chaos. The debate turned to how best to approach the assault. Some of the blades, their blood hot from Waynun's attack and outraged by the assassination of their comrades, argued for a swift and devastating strike, to storm the caverns with swords bared and exact retribution. But cooler heads prevailed. The Mythic Dawn was still largely an enigma. They did not know how many cultists guarded the shrine, nor what traps or dark sorceries might await inside. Charging in blind could result in the cult's leaders, or even the amulet, slipping through their fingers amid the chaos. Or worse, Martin himself becoming a retaliatory target if the cult were alerted. Instead, a subtler path was decided upon. Grandmaster Joffrey agreed with the plan that the hero proposed: infiltration. The hero of Kvatch volunteered to go alone, posing as a new recruit seeking to join the Mythic Dawn. It was a bold and perilous gambit, for it meant walking unarmed into the lion's den, but it also offered the best chance to slip into the cult's inner sanctum, locate the Amulet of Kings, and perhaps retrieve it without raising the alarm until it was too late. Preparations were made swiftly. Among the items recovered from the Mythic Dawn agents so far were their distinctive robes, hooded vestments of deep crimson embroidered with the rising sun symbol of Mehrunes Dagon. The hero donned one such robe, taken from a slain cultist, to serve as their disguise. They also committed to memory the recognition codes and customs of the cult. The greetings like "Dawn is breaking" and the proper responses, gleaned from the commentaries and the sponsor's note. Every detail that could lend credibility to their imposture was considered. Martin, though anxious about sending his savior alone into danger, lent what knowledge he could from his studies of Daedric worship, and gave the hero a solemn blessing for luck. As dusk fell over Cloud Ruler Temple, the hero made ready to depart. Joffrey and Boris saw them off at the gate, each clasping the hero's forearm in the manner of soldiers. In the gathering dark, the torches of the fortress cast long shadows. Martin stood above on the battlements, a solitary figure watching as his last hope walked into the night. The hero of Kvatch took one last look at the firelit stronghold, a beacon of the Empire's resilience, and then ventured down the mountain road toward the east, alone and resolute. For 2 days and nights, the hero travelled across Cyrodiil under the guise of a Mythic Dawn initiate. They avoided main roads, skirting villages and towns to draw as little attention as possible. As they passed through the eastern countryside, they saw signs that the Oblivion Crisis was worsening by the day. Smoke smudged the horizons in several directions. Brushfires and destruction from newly opened gates, no doubt. On a moonless night, the hero crested a hill and spotted a sullen red glow pulsating on the far side of the great forest. A fresh Oblivion gate had erupted there, casting an evil aura on the clouds above. In villages, windows were shuttered early, and dogs barked uneasily at unseen threats in the dark. But the hero pressed on, mindful of the urgency of their mission. By the time they reached the foothills of the Gerald Mountains north of Cheydinhal, the air had grown thin and cold. The terrain became rugged, with towering pines and massive grey boulders littering the slopes. At last, under a star-pricked sky, they arrived at Lake Arius. True to its name, it was a small mountain lake, its still waters black as ink at night, and reflecting the pale sliver of Massa, one of Nirn's moons. It was past midnight when the hero located the mouth of Lake Arius caverns, hidden among the rocks on the lakeshore. The entrance yawned like the maw of some great beast, framed by jagged stone and partially obscured by brush. Faint torchlight flickered from within, confirming that this was no ordinary cave. It was inhabited. Heart pounding, the hero stepped forward, shrouded in the cult's red robe. At the dark threshold, a voice challenged them. "Who comes?" A sentry emerged from the gloom. A Breton man, clad in the same red raiment, a steel mace hanging from his belt. His eyes were wary as he scrutinized the stranger. The hero spoke the words of initiation in a steady tone. At this, the sentry's guarded stance softened. He introduced himself as Harrow, an adept of the Mythic Dawn assigned to greet new inductees. He bid the hero enter, but first he demanded a sign of trust. The hero must surrender all weapons and valuables before proceeding into the shrine. Swallowing a flicker of fear, the hero complied. It was a dangerous requirement, but not unforeseen. The Mythic Dawn would not allow an armed stranger into their inner sanctum. Piece by piece, the hero handed over their sword, bow, potions, and any other gear, placing them into a chest that Harrow secured with a heavy lock. Clad now only in the simple robe and unarmed, the hero was effectively at the mercy of the cult. They steeled themselves, knowing that from here on, only wits, stealth, and courage would serve them. Harrow gave a thin smile of approval, remarking that the master requires unwavering faith. With that, he turned and led the hero deeper into the caverns. The tunnel wound downwards, lit at intervals by torches ensconced in human skulls, a macabre decoration that set the hero's teeth on edge. Eventually, the narrow passage opened into a vast natural grotto. The hero could not help but gasp softly at the sight unveiled before them. They stood at the threshold of the shrine of Mundus Dagon, the secret heart of the Mythic Dawn cult. The cavern was colossal, its ceiling disappearing into shadow far above. In the center loomed a towering statue of Mundus Dagon himself, carved from the cavern's living rock. The Daedric prince was depicted in his fearsome four-armed form, each hand clutching a sword or axe, his stone visage snarling eternally. The statue's eyes glowed a demonic red in the dim light, as if alive. Before the dread statue lay a grand altar dais, accessed by steep steps and flanked by flickering braziers that filled the chamber with dancing light and the pungent scent of incense. Rows of robed cultists stood in silent congregation on the cavern floor, facing the altar. Their faces were illuminated by the brazier fires, eyes reflecting fanatic devotion as they listened to a figure speaking at the head of the room. That figure was Mankar Cameron. The hero's heart skipped at finally seeing the mysterious leader of the Mythic Dawn with their own eyes. Mankar stood atop the dais, clad in resplendent robes of silk, the color of midnight, a striking contrast to the crimson-clad acolytes below. Though an Ultima by birth, there was something otherworldly about him, an unnatural pallor to his skin and an intensity in his gaze that made him seem almost a figure from a dream. Around his neck, unmistakable even at a distance, hung the Amulet of Kings, the ruby gleaming with an inner fire against the blue of Mankar's robes. Before him on the altar lay an open book that radiated a faint reddish glow. The Mysterium Xerxes, the very tome written by Mundus Dagon and given to Mankar as the source of his unholy knowledge. Its pages shimmered with Daedric script, and just looking at it made the hero's skin crawl with a sense of potent malign power. This was the artifact Martin had mentioned from his lore, the key that Mankar used to create his paradise, and perhaps much worse. Harrow motioned the hero to join the assembled ranks. They slipped in among the chanting acolytes, blending as just another cowled figure. Mankar Cameron's voice echoed through the cavern, rich and compelling, amplified by the acoustics of the chamber. He was delivering a sermon, and the hero arrived at its climax. "We have waited long for this moment," Mankar declared, his voice dripping with zeal. He spoke of the coming of Lord Dagon's new dawn, when the false gods of the Empire would be overthrown and Tamriel would be liberated from their tyranny. He painted vivid pictures of a paradise awaiting the faithful, a world remade under Dagon's image, free of suffering and strife. at least as the cult saw it. The cultists around the hero sighed and murmured in ecstasy at these promises, their eyes fixed adoringly on Mankar. The hero listened intently, heart thundering, as every word Mankar uttered seemed to confirm Martin's fears. Mankar claimed that with the Amulet of Kings in their possession, the barriers between Oblivion and Mundus had finally been broken. "The dragonfires are cold, the dragonborn blood tainted no more," he intoned. "Nothing now stands between the Master, Mehrunes Dagon, and the dominion that is rightly his." As he spoke, tremors of fervor ran through the crowd. Mankar Cameron raised his hands high, and the amulet glinted at his throat. He thundered that the last unbelieving Septim, the hidden heir, would soon be destroyed, and that no more shall the gates of Oblivion be barred. The hero's fists clenched under their robe, nails digging into their palms at hearing Martin threatened. Yet they kept their head bowed, maintaining the facade of a devoted listener. At last, as the sermon reached a fevered pitch, Mankar Cameron declared the final phase of their plan was at hand. With a sweeping gesture to the cult, he proclaimed he would now ascend to paradise to prepare the way for Lord Dagon's coming. The congregation responded with a hushed awe. Mankar then turned and nodded to two figures standing near the altar. The hero noted one was a woman in crimson robes who bore a striking family resemblance to Raven Cameron. This must be Bruma Cameron, Mankar's daughter and another of the cult's leaders. The other was a hulking cultist who began some incantation near the Xerxes. Mankar Cameron placed his hand on the Mysterium Xerxes and, channeling its power, began to cast a mighty spell. A great surge of magicka pulsed through the air, raising the hairs on the hero's neck. Suddenly, beside the altar, a shimmering tear in reality formed. A portal, swirling with lights and ethereal mist. Mankar Cameron turned back to his followers, one last time. "To paradise," he cried. "Await the coming glory, my children, and walk without fear through the gates of night." And with that, Mankar clutched the Amulet of Kings tightly and stepped into the glowing portal. In a flash, his form vanished. He had left the mortal world, escaping into his own private realm of Oblivion with the amulet in hand. The portal swirled shut behind him with a low thunderclap, then disappeared. Mankar Cameron and the Amulet of Kings were gone beyond reach. A wave of exultation swept through the cultists. They believed this act heralded the final victory of their plot. The hero, however, felt a knot of anxiety. The amulet was now truly out of this world, and Mankar would not be easily reached. Still, the mission remained. Recover the Mysterium Xerxes and disrupt the cult. Martin would need that tome to find a way to pursue Mankar, since ordinary means could not retrieve the amulet now. With Mankar gone, Bruma Cameron assumed leadership of the ceremony. She stepped forward, her eyes alight with fanatical pride. Bruma announced that the final initiations of new members would now take place, as a way to honor Lord Dagon in Mankar's absence. At her signal, two cultists dragged a prisoner into view. An Argonian man, bound and weary, was pulled from a cage at the base of the altar steps. The hero's pulse quickened. They recognized the prisoner's vestments. He wore the tattered remains of a priest's robe from the Temple of the Nine in the Imperial City. This must be Gelius, a holy man who had gone missing weeks ago, rumored to have been abducted from the Temple District. Indeed, Gelius was known in the Imperial City as a devout Argonian priest. And here he was, bruised, exhausted, and intended as a sacrificial offering to Mehrunes Dagon. Bruma Cameron's voice echoed in the chamber. "Behold, the sacrificial victim, an Argonian priest of the Nine Divines, a gift to Lord Dagon." The cultists responded with hungry, eager eyes. Turning to the handful of new initiates, the hero included, Bruma declared that to prove their devotion, Each initiate must slay the sacrifice in Dagon's name. With a ceremonious gesture, she produced a ritual dagger, its blade honed and already stained from previous atrocities, and extended it towards the hero, who by all appearances was the foremost recruit present. A hush fell over the assembled cultists. All eyes were on this supposed new acolyte, expecting them to step forward and commit the bloody deed. The moment of truth had come. The hero's mind raced. To maintain cover, they would have to appear willing to murder an innocent. But to do so was unthinkable. It would betray everything they fought for. And perhaps even more pragmatically, a part of the hero realized that Julius might prove an ally, or at least did not deserve to die in terror. In that heartbeat of decision, the hero made their choice. They refused this vile command. Summoning every ounce of courage and the element of surprise, the hero sprang into action. In one fluid motion, instead of taking the dagger to kill the prisoner, they slashed at Ruma Cameron herself with it. The razor-edged blade cut across Ruma's extended hand, causing her to cry out and recoil. A collective gasp rose from the onlookers. In that instant, the hero's disguise was shattered. "Betrayal!" Ruma shrieked, clutching her bleeding hand. "The ceremony is desecrated. Guards, kill the intruder!" All hell broke loose in the cavern. The assembled cultists, stunned for a mere second, erupted in rage and confusion. Several drew weapons from beneath their robes, while others began hurling fireballs and lightning, not even caring that they might strike their own in the frenzy. The cultists nearest the altar rushed forward to intercept them. Unarmed and outnumbered, the hero faced long odds, but they were far from helpless. Seizing a fallen cultist's sword, they parried the first attacker's swing and riposted, felling him with a single precise thrust. Julius, though weak, mustered his courage and grabbed a fallen axe to defend himself. The cavern that moments ago echoed with chants of devotion now rang with the clash of steel, screams of anger, and cries of pain. In the chaos, a strange thing happened. For a moment, it felt as if time slowed. The hero's senses sharpened to a razor's edge. They caught a glimpse of Ruma Cameron on the dais above, eyes blazing with hatred as she hurled a bolt of lightning toward them. The hero ducked. The deadly bolt scorched the air and blew apart a brazier showering sparks. Julius cowered behind the altar, praying fervently to the Nine for deliverance. Across the chamber, more cultists poured in from side tunnels, alerted by the commotion. It was now or never. The hero realized the only way to survive was to cause enough havoc to cover an escape. Their gaze fell upon the Mysterium Xerxes, still sitting atop the altar. That book must not fall into cult hands again, the hero thought, and Martin will need it. Dodging between two enraged devotees, the hero sprinted up the steps of the dais. Ruma Cameron moved to block the altar, chanting a vicious incantation. Dark energy coalesced around her fingertips, a spell of life-draining sorcery. As she advanced, "You will pay for defiling this holy place," she cried. But before Ruma could unleash her magic, the hero countered with a desperate maneuver. They had retrieved a reserve dagger, one hidden in their boot that Harrow hadn't found, and now flung it with deadly accuracy. The dagger spun end over end and embedded itself into Ruma's chest. She gasped, crimson blooming on her robe. The spell on her lips died as she staggered back. The hero, not wasting a second, closed the distance and with a swift slash of the cultist's sword in hand, struck Ruma Cameron down. Mankar's daughter, a principal lieutenant of the cult, collapsed atop the very altar where she had overseen so many murders, her lifeblood mingling with the sacrificial runes. A sudden hush fell among some of the cultists, a collective gasp at seeing one of their leaders slain. But the battle raged on as the most fanatical of them fought all the harder, vowing vengeance. Wasting no time, the hero seized the Mysterium Xerxes from the altar. The moment their fingers touched the heavy tome, they felt a jolt. a resonant thrum of Daedric power, as if the book itself were alive and aware of its removal. The Xerxes was an ancient folio bound in blackened leather, its pages glowing with infernal script. As the hero pulled it free, a deep rumble resonated through the cavern. High above, the great statue of Mehrunes Dagon shuddered. Fine cracks spiderwebbed across its four-armed form, and with a thunderous crash, a piece of the statue's horn broke off and fell to the ground. The shrine was beginning to collapse. Whether from the unbinding of its magic, or the wrath of Dagon at this profane interruption, none could say. Chunks of rock rained down, smashing into the floor and sending cultists scrambling. A few candles were knocked over, igniting tapestries and wooden sconces. Flames began to lick up the walls, filling the air with smoke. The Mythic Dawn's secret sanctuary was literally coming apart around them. Clutching the Xerxes tightly under one arm, the hero fought their way down from the dais. "Julius, this way!" they shouted. The Argonian, who had been parrying a cultist's saber with the axe, saw the falling debris and understood they had to flee or be buried alive. With a surge of adrenaline, he bashed his assailant aside and stumbled toward the hero. Together, dodging both enemies and collapsing masonry, the hero and Julius made for the tunnel from which the hero had originally entered. Harrow, the doorkeeper, tried to bar their way at the last instant, his mace raised with a trembling mix of fear and fury. But seeing the blood-slick sword in the hero's hand and the raging inferno behind them, his resolve faltered. The hero struck with lightning speed, and Harrow fell mortally wounded, joining the fate of his fellow misguided devotees. With Harrow's death, the hero recovered the key to the chest containing their confiscated equipment. Quickly, they snatched their gear back, strapping on their sword belt and yanking free their bow, invigorated to feel the familiar weight of their arms once more. The two escapees plunged into the dim passage, leaving the cavernous shrine engulfed in flames and chaos behind them. They could hear enraged shouts and screams of pain echoing as more of the ceiling gave way in there. The hero led the way through the twisting tunnels, using memory and the fresh breeze of night air as their guide. Once or twice, surviving cultists ambushed them from side passages, desperate to stop their flight. In those cramped corridors, the hero's blade flashed, and Julius, regaining some of his strength, even managed to throw a well-timed punch or swing a torch at a cultist's head. Their determination carried them forward. Step by step, the air grew fresher, the tunnel wider. At last, they saw it. The pale light of the moons shining through the cave mouth ahead. The hero and Julius burst out of Lake Arius caverns into the cool pre-dawn darkness. Stars still glimmered overhead, and the silhouette of pines loomed black against the sky. They were free. Behind them, the caverns belched a plume of dust and smoke, and a dull rumble signaled the final collapse of the shrine's great hall. The Dagon shrine, the blasphemous heart of the Mythic Dawn, was left in ruins, its profane statue toppled and its inner circle shattered by blood and fire. Those cultists who survived would find nothing but death and rubble, where once they had rallied around their master's voice. The hero stood for a moment at the cave entrance, catching their breath. The Mysterium Xerxes clutched in their hands. They had paid a heavy toll in danger and carnage this night, but the rewards were great. The cult's base was destroyed, the Xerxes was secured, and both Raven and Rumour Cameron lay dead, striking two grievous blows to the Mythic Dawn's leadership. Most importantly, the hero was alive, and so was Julius, the innocent meant for slaughter. The Argonian priest sank to his knees, overcome with gratitude and shock. He looked up at the hero with unblinking reptilian eyes that brimmed with tears. You saved me," he stammered, voice shaking. The hero gently lifted him to his feet, assuring Julius that Akatosh must have guided their path to be there in that crucial moment. Julius vowed to return at once to the imperial city temple of the One, and offer prayers for the hero and Martin Septim, whose existence he had learned of from the cult's ravings. He promised that word of what truly happened in Lake Arius would reach the highest circles of the church. After a brief rest, the resilient priest began his journey home, disappearing down the mountain trail as the first light of dawn touched the east. The hero of Kvatch watched him go, then turned toward the north. There was one final journey to make this night, back to Cloud Ruler Temple, to deliver the precious Mysterium Xerxes and the news of all that had transpired. Though exhausted and bruised, the hero felt a surge of triumph and purpose carrying them onward. By mid-morning, a lathered horse bore them through the gates of Cloud Ruler. Martin and Joffrey came running to greet the hero, alarm melting into profound relief at seeing them safe. In the courtyard, surrounded by anxious blades, the hero recounted the tale. The secret meeting and Raven Cameron's demise, the decoding of the hidden message, the perilous masquerade in the shrine, Mankar Cameron's escape into paradise with the amulet, and the fiery destruction of the cult's inner sanctum. As Martin listened, his eyes shone with wonder and concern in equal measure. The hero then presented Martin with the Mysterium Xerxes itself. The heir handled the unholy book carefully, respect and dread on his face. He recognized it as a key, perhaps the only key, to pursuing Mankar Cameron into his realm and retrieving the Amulet of Kings. Despite the mixed victory, for the amulet was still beyond their reach, the mood at Cloud Ruler Temple that day was the brightest since the crisis began. They had struck a resounding blow against the Mythic Dawn cult. With their hideout obliterated and their leaders dead or in hiding, the Mythic Dawn's murderous grip on the Empire had been broken. No longer would cultists be able to operate with impunity from the shadows. Their grand conspiracy had been exposed and dismantled at its core. Grandmaster Joffrey himself clasped the hero's shoulder proudly and declared that their actions would be enshrined in the Blade's records for ages to come. Baurus, resting from his own wounds nearby, grinned wide and offered the hero a deep bow, a gesture of honor from one blade to another. Yet, amid the celebration, Martin Septim's gaze drifted to the distant south, worry clouding his features. For even as the Mythic Dawn collapsed, the Oblivion Crisis itself raged on. In the weeks following the fall of Kvatch and the cult's dispersal, Mehrunes Dagon's forces did not relent. In fact, they grew more brazen. Reports flooded into Cloud Ruler Temple. Dozens of Oblivion gates were now opening across Cyrodiil and beyond, even outside every major city in Tamriel. The Daedric legions were invading in earnest, spewing forth from portals near Anvil's shimmering coast, on the outskirts of Noble Coral, in the shadow of the Great Bridge at Leowyn, and even within sight of the... No corner of the Empire was untouched. Where once the Mythic Dawn had worked in secrecy, now the Daedra overtly waged war on the mortal realm. The Imperial Legion and city guards fought desperately to contain these incursions. In Bruma, soldiers stood watch on the walls day and night, eyes on a gate that crackled in the tundra below. In Cheydinhall, a brave guard captain led sorties to push Daedric scamps back through a portal near the city's east gate. And along the Gold Road, travellers banded together in armed convoys, fearfully skirting regions where ominous red storms gathered, heralding a gate's presence. The land of Cyrodiil was in turmoil, suffering the onslaught of a plenmeld it had no power to stop, unless Martin Septim could unleash his dragonborn birthright. In the sanctuary of Cloud Ruler Temple's great hall, Martin pored over the Mysterium Xerxes in the days that followed, seeking a way to enter Mankar Cameron's paradise. He understood that only by reaching Mankar, now a self-appointed demigod in his pocket realm, could they retrieve the Amulet of Kings and restore the Dragonfires. Surrounded by candles and scrolls, Martin deciphered, piece by piece, the dangerous knowledge within the Xerxes. determined to twist the cult's evil to righteous ends. The hero, for their part, took what rest they could, yet remained ever on guard and ready. They knew that even without the Mythic Dawn, Mehrunes Dagon's armies were a dire threat that needed confronting soon. The Blades redoubled efforts to fortify Cloud Ruler and gather allies, for the storm was far from over. Safe at Cloud Ruler Temple, Martin Septim pored over the Mysterium Xarxes with an intensity fueled by both curiosity and desperation. The Xarxes, he found, was no ordinary book. It was imbued with powerful Daedric sorcery. By candlelight in the temple's great hall, Martin deciphered line after line of the alien runes, even as the effort clearly took a toll on him. His eyes grew sunken and red from sleepless nights, and at times a chill would fill the hall as he spoke parts of the text aloud. "It is a testament written in Mehrunes Dagon's own hand," Martin marveled quietly, "a door to the divinity of princes." And indeed, a door to madness for many who tried to decode it. Joffrey and the Blades grew concerned for Martin's safety as he wrestled with the book's dark knowledge, but Martin waved off their worries. "If I'm to save Tamriel, I must pay the price this knowledge demands," he said, fully aware that delving into such evil texts could scar one's soul. Nonetheless, Akatosh's blood ran strong in him. Martin's will was iron. Over days and weeks, piece by piece, he unraveled the secret ritual that Mankar Cameron had used to create his paradise and how they might follow. At last, Martin assembled the clues into a plan. The Xarxes revealed that Mankar's paradise, a realm he called Gaia Alata, was a pocket dimension of oblivion, created by the power of Mehrunes Dagon and sustained by the Amulet of Kings itself. To reopen a portal into that realm, effectively to invade paradise, Martin would need to perform a complex ritual. Specifically, 4 key components were required, each a potent symbol or conduit of power from both mortal and immortal sources. A Daedric artifact, the blood of a Daedra lord. One of the great artifacts of the Daedric princes, such as Azura's star, Mehrunes' razor, the Saviour's hide, etc. These objects carried a fragment of a Daedra lord's essence. Sacrificing such an artifact would provide the blood of a Daedra needed to breach the boundary between worlds. The blood of a divine. This was interpreted as a holy relic of one of the divines containing their power. In this case, Martin determined it meant a relic of Tiber Septim, the one mortal who became a divine as Talos. Specifically, Joffrey knew of Tiber Septim's ancient armor, kept at Sancre Tor, which bore the Septim's bloodstains from his mortal life. This could serve as the blood of a divine for the ritual. A great Welkin stone, a massive crystal of Ayleid origin, saturated with magical energy. The smaller Welkin stones were common in Ayleid ruins and glowed with magicka, but the great Welkin stone was a much rarer artifact, essentially a giant focal point of sorcery. Legend held that one last great Welkin stone remained in the ruins of Miskarkand, an ancient Ayleid city. This stone would provide the immense power needed to create a portal, a great sigil stone. This was the most daunting requirement. The great sigil stone taken from a great Oblivion gate. The sigil stones were the anchor points that kept Oblivion gates open. A great sigil stone, however, could only come from the kind of great gate that destroyed Kvatch. That meant deliberately allowing the enemy to open another great gate and then claiming its stone. Martin grimly noted that this would require a risky gambit. They would have to bait Mehrunes Dagon into another massive attack, just so the hero could seize the stone from the great gate at great cost. When Martin shared this plan with the hero and the Blades, there was a mixture of astonishment and trepidation. Retrieving these items would be like a hero's errand out of myth, while war raged on around them. Nevertheless, there was no alternative. This was the only path to reach Mankar Cameron and recover the Amulet of Kings in time. Martin entrusted the hero of Kvatch with these missions, expressing his profound gratitude and understanding of the dangers involved. The hero first set out to secure a Daedric artifact. Fortunately, the lore of Tamriel abounds with such items, though obtaining one is never easy. Martin advised that any artifact from a Daedric prince's trove should suffice, citing that the book itself didn't specify a particular prince. After some deliberation, the hero chose a path that led them to a remote shrine nestled in the mountains, where they undertook a perilous quest to earn the favor of a Daedric prince. Upon completing the task, they were rewarded with a powerful artifact, a relic steeped in ancient magic and history. Though the artifact was precious, the hero knew it must be given up for the greater cause. The chosen artifact would serve as the blood of a Daedra lord in Martin's ritual. Upon returning to Cloud Ruler Temple, Martin accepted the artifact with a solemn nod, acknowledging the sacrifice made for the salvation of Tamriel. Next was the armor of Mythic Septim, the relic identified to represent the blood of a divine. Joffrey explained that this armor was entombed in Sancre-Tor, an ancient crypt in the Gerald Mountains that once was a holy place for the Blades. Mythic Septim's armor had been placed there with great honor, guarded by the spirits of the four Blades champions who served him. However, in the centuries since, Sancre-Tor had fallen to evil. Undead and dark sorceries had overrun the crypt, and none who ventured there returned. Knowing this, the hero nonetheless ventured to Sancre-Tor. In the misty, haunted halls of that tomb city, the hero battled vengeful wraiths and skeletal guardians. In a series of trials, they even encountered the cursed undead spirits of the Four Blades of old, who had been trapped in undeath by an ancient evil. Perhaps the doing of Zurin Arctus or Riman's enemies, some say. The hero managed to defeat or release each blade's spirit from its curse, and in gratitude, the freed ghosts opened the sealed chamber where Mythic Septim's armor lay in state. With solemn reverence, the hero retrieved the armor of the divine, a gleaming cuirass still marked with the blood of Talos from his ascension to godhood centuries ago. The moment the armor was taken, the ghosts of the old blades knelt and finally found rest. Returning with the armor, the hero presented it to Martin. Martin was moved to see the relic of his illustrious ancestor. "The blood of a divine," he said softly, as he ran a hand over a dent in the ancient steel. "Still present after all these years. This piece of history would indeed serve the ritual. The essence of Talos within it would help punch a hole into a Daedric paradise." The third item, the Great Welkin Stone, required the hero to delve into Ayleid ruins. Martin had pinpointed Miskarkand, a famed Ayleid city ruin, deep in the great forest of Cyrodiil, as the last known location of a Great Welkin Stone. These stones were the masterpiece of Ayleid sorcery, giant crystal lattices that could store magicka of an entire city. Miskarkand had been abandoned for millennia, and few dared to enter its halls, for it was said to be the lair of undead Ayleid sorcerers, and worse. Undeterred, the hero entered Miskarkand's sunless depths. Through traps and puzzles left by the Heartland High Elves, and battles with restless zombies and wraiths of ancient Ayleid guardians, the hero made their way to the grand central chamber of Miskarkand. There, atop a pedestal bathed in eerie blue light, sat the Great Welkin Stone, roughly the size of a man's head and glowing with arcane power. Reaching it, however, stirred the ruin's greatest danger. King Narilmor, the undead Ayleid lord of Miskarkand, awoke from his enchanted slumber to defend his jewel. The hero engaged in a furious duel with this Lich King, whose spells of fire and lightning lit up the crumbling hall. Ultimately, the hero prevailed, shattering Narilmor's corpse with blade and magicka. They then claimed the Great Welkin Stone. The moment the hero touched the stone, it pulsed brightly, as if recognizing a new destiny after centuries in darkness. With this colossal source of magical energy in hand, the bright spark of ancient Aldmeris, as Martin called it, the hero returned again to Cloud Ruler Temple. Martin gratefully accepted the Welkin stone, carefully securing the fragile yet potent crystal. Now, 3 of the 4 components were gathered. Each item on its own was extraordinary. Together, they hinted at a ritual of tremendous significance. All that remained was the most perilous ingredient, a great sigil stone. This final task could not be accomplished by stealth or quest. It would require a direct confrontation with the forces of Oblivion on the field of battle. To obtain a great sigil stone, a great gate must be opened, and that would only occur during a major offensive by Mehrunes Dagon's army, like at Kvatch. Martin grimly realized what this meant. They would have to bait the enemy into launching a great gate by using Martin himself as the lure. Mehrunes Dagon's ultimate goal was to exterminate the last Septim and seize Cyrodiil. If Martin's presence were made known and concentrated in one defensible location, the cult would surely throw everything they had at it in an attempt to kill him. Joffrey and the Blades considered the options. The enemy was already probing near Bruma, the city closest to Cloud Ruler Temple. Given the intelligence from slain spies, the Mythic Dawn likely planned to strike Bruma next, hoping to flush Martin out. Rather than wait, Martin proposed to meet the enemy at Bruma on their terms, but well prepared and with allies gathered. The plan was daring: allow the Mythic Dawn to open a great gate at Bruma, fight a pitched battle to keep it open long enough, then send the hero into the gate to grab the great sigil stone and close it. It would be the Battle of Bruma, a do-or-die gambit that could either deliver the key to victory or end with Martin dead and the war lost. Preparations began at once. Joffrey sent out calls for aid to every city in Cyrodiil. After the fall of Kvatch, the other counties understood the severity of the threat. Martin, in a display of leadership, personally went to Bruma's ruler, Countess Narina Carven, and revealed his identity. He implored her help in defending not just Bruma, but all of Cyrodiil, by allowing him to use her city as the rally point against the coming siege. The Countess, a proud Nord noble, agreed to stand with Martin. In council, they decided to evacuate Bruma's civilians to safer locations in the countryside and convert the city into a fortified war camp for the coming battle. But Bruma's local garrison alone would not be enough. Allies were needed from every corner of the province. Thus, the hero of Kvatch undertook a diplomatic campaign to gather allies for the coming battle. The hero travelled to each of Cyrodiil's major cities: Anvil, Cheydinhal, Corral, Cheydinhal, Leowyn, Breville, and Skingrad, carrying Martin's plea for reinforcements. In each city, the situation was similar. Oblivion gates had opened nearby, threatening the locality and tying up the city's defenders. The counts and countesses were hesitant to send troops away when their own homes were at risk. However, the hero tipped the scales. In every city, the hero bravely volunteered to close the Oblivion gate that menaced that region, as a show of goodwill and to free their soldiers for the larger cause. These feats became legend in their own right. The hero, darting into the fiery portals outside city walls and emerging sometime later with the sigil stone, collapsing the gate behind them. In Cheydinhal, for example, the Knights of the Thorn, a local band of noble would-be heroes, had rashly entered a gate and become trapped. The hero not only closed that gate, but rescued the few survivors of that group, earning the eternal gratitude of Count Andel Indaris. In Anvil, the hero fought alongside the city guard to repel Daedra, long enough to enter and close the gate on the Gold Road. One by one, the threat to each city was lessened, and the rulers, convinced of the hero's power and Martin's leadership, agreed to dispatch some of their troops to Bruma. The mustering of the allies was an unprecedented display of Cyrodiilic unity. From Anvil, a company of hardy Colovian knights rode east, leaving the Gold Coast guarded by the local militia. From Skingrad, Count Janus Hasildor, himself a secret vampire, sent some of his elite guardsmen, led by a battle mage, as he knew the value of aiding Martin's cause. Coral dispatched a detachment of its renowned steel-clad infantry, personally encouraged by Countess Ariana Valga, who believed in the old ways of honor. Cheydinhall's guard, under the command of the stalwart captain Ulrich Leland, marched west after the hero's deeds saved the Count's son. Bravil, though poorer, released a small but fierce band of archers to join the defense. Leowin, in the far south, after hearing of others' contributions and dealing with its own gate at the hero's hands, sent a token force of spearmen upriver. Even the Imperial City contributed a contingent of Imperial Legion soldiers from the reserve cohort when High Chancellor Okato was convinced by the hero's reports and a personal letter from Martin. By the time all these forces quietly converged in Bruma, the city's defense swelled impressively. A patchwork army of Imperials, Nords, Redguards, Dunmer, Altmer, and others, all united under Martin Septim's banner. Martin made a point of greeting each contingent and thanking them sincerely. Many of these soldiers had never expected to fight alongside each other, but Martin's presence inspired them. Around campfires on the eve of battle, veterans swapped stories of the gates the hero had closed in their homelands. The hero of Kvatch, though modest, was recognized by all as the champion who had delivered their cities from certain doom. That gave hope that they could do the same at Bruma. Meanwhile, the Mythic Dawn was indeed moving. Scouts and spies reported increasing Daedra sightings around Bruma's perimeter. Lesser Oblivion gates began popping up around the highlands outside the city as a prelude to the main assault. The Bruma Guard, aided by some of the allied troops, diligently closed these smaller gates or contained the Daedra coming from them to avoid being overrun before the main battle. One significant early skirmish involved Captain Bird of the Bruma Guard and the hero closing a gate right outside Bruma's walls, which had opened as if testing the defenses. That success gave the city defenders confidence and also alerted them that a far larger strike was imminent. In Cloudruler Temple, Martin finished the last preparations for the grand strategy. He entrusted the 3 gathered ritual items to safe holders. He donned the storied Imperial dragon armor of his forefathers, a gleaming declaration that the last Septim had at last embraced the mantle of Emperor. On the day before battle, Martin addressed the combined forces in Bruma's chapel. In a stirring speech, he invoked the memory of his father, Uriel Septim VII, the valor of those who died at Kvatch, and the unity of all provinces against this otherworldly threat. He urged them to fight, not for him, but for Tamriel, for every village, every city, every family threatened by the Daedra. The soldiers, inspired and shouting their oaths, made ready. The Battle of Bruma was the largest pitched battle against the Daedric forces ever recorded in the Crisis. Early one cold morning, the plains outside Bruma saw the clash of 2 worlds. Martin Septim, the hero of Kvatch, and a force of perhaps 100 soldiers assembled on the field south of the city. Snow flurries danced in the air as men and Mare checked their blades and bows one last time. The plan was simple and daring. Hold the line against the Daedra long enough for the Mythic Dawn to deploy a great gate. That meant resisting wave after wave of enemies without breaking. The Countess of Bruma, Narina Carvain, oversaw her city's final defences on the walls, while Martin took to the field to lead the troops personally. A true Septim, rallying his legions. The first sign of the enemy was a deep, resonant hum of magic. Suddenly, multiple Oblivion gates tore open on the battlefield, emitting a blood-red glow against the morning's grey light. From these portals surged the Daedric hordes, snarling scamps and clanfears bounding forward, hulking Daedroth lizards roaring, flame atronachs swirling fire, and grim, armoured Dremora churls marching with wicked blades. The allied force braced shields and lowered pikes. Martin shouted a command, and a volley of arrows launched into the oncoming creatures. The arrows struck true, felling some of the lesser beasts, but more kept coming. The ground war erupted. Bruma's defenders crashed into the Daedra with swords and axes, and the air filled with a cacophony of steel on obsidian flesh and the screams of the dying. At the forefront, Martin fought with inspiring bravery. Though not a seasoned warrior, he swung a silver longsword and kept formation with his blade's bodyguards. The hero of Kvatch was everywhere on the field. Whenever a clanfear broke through, or a Dremora champion threatened to cleave through the line, the hero was there to meet them, rallying nearby soldiers with acts of singular valor. Boris and Joffrey fought as well, each cutting down multiple foes in defense of Martin. The allies from different cities fought shoulder to shoulder. A Redguard spearman from Anvil saved a Nordaxman from a Daedroth's bite. A Dunmer archer from Cheydinhall picked off a flame atronach before it immolated a group of Imperials. It was a rare sight of unity. The crisis had truly brought them together against a common foe. As planned, the Daedra initially focused on brute force to wipe out the defenders. But the longer the battle drew on, the more it became clear the mortals were holding their own. Dozens of Daedra lay dead, banished back to Oblivion, at the cost of many wounded on the human side. But morale remained strong, with Martin visible in the fray. Frustrated, the Daedric commanders escalated their assault. More Oblivion gates opened, disgorging tougher fiends, including the higher caste Dremora warriors. The field outside Bruma became a hellscape of battle, with craters from magical explosions and patches of unnatural fire. Yet still, the line held. After a grueling stretch of combat, a horn sounded from the Daedric lines. It was the moment the allies were waiting for, and dreading. The Mythic Dawn had decided to deploy their ultimate weapon, the Great Gate. Behind the first waves of attackers, a colossal portal began to form, dwarfing the lesser gates beside it. This great Oblivion gate unfurled like a fiery maw, framed by jagged spires and crackling with energy. The sky above Bruma darkened to a deep crimson. It was as if a giant bleeding wound had opened in reality. Knowing what was coming, Martin yelled for the troops to redouble their efforts and hold just a little longer. "Stand fast, for the Empire," he cried, and those who heard him fought with renewed ferocity. From within the depths of the great gate came a sound of grinding metal and monstrous bellows. The ground trembled. The outline of a titanic siege engine materialized in the portal. Mehrunes Dagon's siege crawler was making its entry into Mundus once more. Its jagged tusks and hull started to emerge, inch by terrifying inch, through the gateway. This great gate was akin to the one that destroyed Kvatch, and all knew that if the siege crawler fully emerged, Bruma would suffer Kvatch's fate. The defenders looked on in dread as the colossal machine's visage appeared in flames. At that critical moment, the hero of Kvatch knew what had to be done. Seizing the moment amid the chaos, the hero broke from the defensive line and sprinted directly toward the great gate. Martin and Joffrey shouted after the hero, but they understood. This was the plan. Under covering fire from Bruma's archers, the hero dashed past clashing fighters, evading a swinging mace of a Dremora, and dove headlong into the glowing portal of the great gate, just as it had fully stabilized. In that instant, the hero passed from the embattled fields of Mundus into the heart of Mehrunes Dagon's Deadlands. Inside the great gate's Oblivion plain, time was of the essence. The hero found themselves in a bizarre, war-scorched region, specifically designed as a siege simulator. A hellish landscape built to accommodate the massive siege crawler's deployment. Unlike the previous Gate realms, this one was essentially a battlefield mirrored in Oblivion, a charred plain under a red sky, dotted with Daedric war machinery and guarded by elite Dremora. The great siege crawler itself was trundling along a fiery path in that realm, already in motion towards the portal to Tamriel. The hero had to race it to the sigil tower that controlled the great gate. If they failed, the siege crawler would emerge on Nirn and obliterate Bruma. Thus began a desperate race against time. The hero fought and dodged through the war-torn hellscape, cutting down Dremora Valkynas, high commanders, and sidestepping spouts of volcanic flame erupting from the ground. Outside in Bruma, Martin's forces continued to battle fiercely, protecting the physical Great Gate from being disrupted while the hero was inside. Minutes felt like hours. The siege crawler in Oblivion moved steadily, a gigantic spiked behemoth of metal legs and fire-belching cannons. Every second, it drew nearer to the portal threshold. The hero's heart pounded with exertion and determination. Drawing on every reserve, they slew a gatekeeper at the foot of the main sigil tower and dashed inside. Ascending the sigil tower of a great gate was even more daunting than a normal one. The architecture was larger, the corridors guarded by the fiercest Daedra, including Chivalai, tall, cruel Daedra, with both weapon skill and sorcery. The hero cut through them, climbing ever upward as the entire structure quaked. The siege machine's movement seemed linked, adding urgency. At last, reaching the summit, the hero burst into the sigil chamber. There, floating above its dais, was the prize, the great sigil stone, radiating an intense corona of energy that powered the great gate's existence. Outside, on Nirn's side, the siege crawler's front half had pushed through the portal, its gigantic bulk looming over the battlefield. It began spewing flame, incinerating several soldiers and crushing siege defenses underfoot. Bruma's defenders wavered as the monstrous engine fully emerged. Only a miracle could stop it now. Inside the tower, the hero of Kvatch provided that miracle. With a final burst of strength, the hero grasped the great sigil stone from its pedestal. In an instant, the magical anchoring of the great gate was ripped loose. Back on the battlefield, the great gate collapsed with a deafening implosion, just as the siege crawler had halfway crawled through. The very fabric of reality snapped shut on the engine. One moment it roared, the next moment the gate was gone. The Daedric behemoth was sliced in two, its rear half lost in oblivion, and its front half crashing down in flames on Bruma's field. The resulting explosion was tremendous. A wave of fire and Daedric matter blasted outward from the portal site, knocking combatants off their feet. When the dust settled, the great gate was no more. The siege crawler lay wrecked and smouldering, destroyed by the collapsing gate. The hordes of Daedra that had been pouring out found themselves cut off from reinforcements and their lord's support. A stunned silence fell across the battlefield, broken only by the crackling of fires. Then the reality sank in. Bruma had been saved. With their primary weapon ruined and no portal to retreat or bring more forces, the remaining Daedra were suddenly vulnerable and outmatched by the still-standing allies. Martin Septim seized the moment, rallying his forces for a final counterattack. "Drive them back! Tamriel is ours!" he shouted. The soldiers, invigorated by this dramatic turn, roared and surged forward. Leaderless and demoralized, the Daedric remaining troops tried to fight on, but were cut down or banished in short order. The field belonged to the Empire's defenders. As cheers rose in ragged, unbelieving waves from the men and Mer of Bruma, the hero of Kvatch emerged from the smoking ruins of the gate, great sigil stone in hand. Soot-streaked and weary, the hero was hailed by Martin and the entire host as the savior of the battle. Soldiers crowded around, clapping the hero's shoulders or raising swords in salute. Many openly acknowledged that without the hero's bravery, they would all be dead or enslaved. Meanwhile, Martin approached and embraced the hero, relief and gratitude evident on his face. The great sigil stone, last component of the ritual, was now secured. In that victorious moment on the field of Bruma, the forces of Tamriel had won their greatest victory of the crisis. What had been likely to become a massacre had turned into a triumph. The first major defeat of Mehrunes Dagon's armies during the war. The cost, though, was not forgotten. Dozens of good soldiers lay fallen, including those from various cities who gave their lives far from home. Martin ordered that the fallen be honoured and buried with full rites, and that letters of commendation be sent to their homelands. They had not died in vain. Their sacrifice helped change the course of history. Bruma's countess thanked Martin and the allies profusely, hosting what modest victory feast she could for the battered survivors that evening. In the chapel, a service was held for the dead, where Martin himself spoke in remembrance, further cementing the loyalty and love people were developing for him. But Martin, while grateful for this win, kept his eye on the true objective. With the great sigil stone in hand, they finally had everything needed to storm Mankar Cameron's paradise. With the victory at Bruma behind them, Martin Septim and his allies returned to Cloud Ruler Temple to immediately put their hard-won prize to use. The great sigil stone's presence was palpable. It emanated a powerful vibrating hum and glowed with an otherworldly light, the largest such stone anyone present had ever seen. Martin carefully set it alongside the other ritual components on an altar inside the temple's hall. Daedric artifact, the armor of Tiber Septim, Divine's relic, the great Welkin stone, Ayleid power source, and now the great sigil stone, Oblivion anchor. This array of artifacts represented a convergence of powers from across existence. Martin studied the Xerxes one final time to be sure of the incantations. He concluded that with these items, he could recreate the portal that Mankar Cameron opened, effectively tearing a temporary hole into Mankar's paradise. All were made aware this would likely be a one-way trip for the hero of Kvatch to enter paradise, confront Mankar, and retrieve the amulet. The portal could perhaps be opened again if needed, but time would be short. Mankar's realm was not Oblivion proper, but a pocket garden of Dagon, sustained by the amulet's power. If the amulet could be recovered, or if Mankar were killed, the paradise might collapse on itself. It was a daunting prospect, but the heroes steeled themselves for the journey. Burus, Stefan, and other blades volunteered to accompany the hero inside, but Martin shook his head. This task, he believed, had to be done by a single champion, while others remained to guard Martin and prepare for the final phase. Martin himself could not go. As a dragonborn, his presence might disrupt the delicate portal, or so he reasoned, though likely he was too important to risk. In the end, the hero of Kvatch alone would venture into the unknown. Thus, in Cloud Ruler's courtyard, under a clear starlit sky, Martin began the ritual to open the portal to paradise. He placed the great sigil stone at the center of a runic circle drawn on the ground. The armor of Tiber Septim was arranged next to it, and he poured a few drops of the Septim blood remnants, rust flakes, from it onto the stone. Finally, Martin raised the great Welkin stone in both hands and started chanting words from the Mysterium Xerxes, spoken in Elnafex and Daedric tongues. The night air became charged with energy. An eerie wind whipped around the courtyard, though the trees were still. The Welkin stone's bluish light intensified, and beams of energy arced between the artifacts. The ground trembled as Martin's voice rose, calling on the powers of Oblivion and Divines in one breath, a dangerous blend that only a dragon blood with a pure heart could hope to mediate. Suddenly, a blast of light and a thunderclap erupted. Those watching shielded their eyes. When they looked again, A doorway of spiraling light had opened in the middle of the courtyard. A portal shimmering like the surface of water, yet showing a glimpse of sunlit fields and strange trees beyond. Martin gasped, momentarily drained, but nodded. The portal was stable. He turned to the hero of Kvatch and pressed a small object into their hand. It was a stone of recall the court wizard of Bruma had enchanted, essentially a token that might help Martin reopen the portal or sense when to pull the hero back. "This is all we can do from this side," Martin said. "The rest is up to you." The hero nodded, understanding that on the other side of this gateway lay the lair of Mankar Cameron, who would not part with the Amulet of Kings willingly. Blades and friends wished the hero well with salutes and claps on the back. With a final look to Martin, who gave a confident, proud smile, the hero stepped through the portal and vanished into Mankar Cameron's paradise. The hero found themselves standing in a land that was both breathtakingly beautiful and profoundly unsettling. This was Gayar Alata, the so-called paradise that Mankar had created for his followers, using the power of the Mysterium Xarxes and the Amulet of Kings. It was an island realm, bathed in eternal daylight under a vibrant sky. Gentle waterfalls cascaded down hills into crystal-clear rivers. Exotic trees and flowering plants, some akin to those in Tamriel, others alien, dotted the landscape. In the distance rose an immense palace of white stone. Carrick Agai Alor, Mankar Cameron's seat, perched atop a mountain. At first glance, it truly looked like an Eden, where one could live in bliss. Yet as the hero ventured further, the illusion of paradise gave way to grim reality. The realm was populated by Mankar's chosen followers, Mythic Dawn adherents who had died in his service and were rewarded by being allowed to live in this world. These cultists roamed the idyllic valley, but their words and eyes betrayed discontent. The hero encountered groups of Mythic Dawn cultists who, upon recognizing an intruder, attacked immediately, still fanatically loyal to Mankar. As the hero fended them off, some other residents kept their distance and whispered. It became clear that paradise was not the utopia it appeared. The immortality granted here came at a cruel price. Those who died in paradise were resurrected, but not back into the tranquil gardens. Instead, they awoke in the Forbidden Grotto, a cavern of punishment where they were tortured eternally by Daedric beasts as penance before being allowed back into the garden. This cycle meant Mankar's followers lived in constant underlying fear, despite the beautiful surroundings. In effect, Mankar had crafted a twisted parody of the afterlife, a promised heaven that concealed a hell. As the hero fought through Mankar's Daedric guardians, for even here, beasts from Oblivion roamed at their master's behest. They also found unlikely allies. A few souls in paradise harbored doubt about Mankar's truth. One such was a Shivalai named Anaxes, bound to guard the path, who the hero could slip past by exploiting the creature's arrogance. Another, more crucially, was a Dremora churl, ironically named Kathutet. This Dremora, once an enemy, was impressed by the hero's prowess in battle and offered a strange sort of respect. He hinted that if the hero could defeat him honorably, he may grant them access to the path ahead. The hero ended up besting Kathutet in combat, or alternatively performing a small task to earn his respect. And true to his word, the Dremora provided the hero with the key to the Forbidden Grotto, acknowledging that only through there could one reach Mankar's palace. This was an unusual instance of a Dremora aiding a mortal, but it illustrated how even among Dagon's servants, personal honor could be found. Descending into the Forbidden Grotto, the hero witnessed the stark reality hidden beneath Paradise's facade. Far from idyllic, the grotto was a grim network of caves and tunnels, where disillusioned and fallen members of the Mythic Dawn languished under watchful Daedric eyes. Amidst the sorrowful echoes and oppressive gloom, the hero encountered Eldamil, an Altmer who had grown remorseful of his service to Mankar Cameron. Eldamil, aware of the hero's mission and the greater threat posed by his former master, offered invaluable aid. Removing the bands of the Chosen, enchanted bindings meant to imprison and torment, Eldamil freed the hero from the grotto's cruel cycle. Together, they navigated perilous passages guarded by vigilant Dremora, emerging at last onto the tranquil yet sinister terrace of dawn. From here, the hero approached their ultimate destination, the soaring spires of Carak Agayalor, Mankar Cameron's grand and illusory palace. Carak Agayalor was a magnificent structure, reminiscent of Aeliad architecture with Daedric touches, gleaming white stone but engraved with runes of oblivion. Inside its great hall, seated upon a throne, was Mankar Cameron himself, flanked by his two children, Raven Cameron and his sister Ruma, reborn in paradise after their deaths. Mankar welcomed the hero with a cold smile, clearly not surprised that they had come. In fact, through his sorcerous foresight, Mankar might have anticipated this confrontation. He still wore the Amulet of Kings around his neck brazenly, using its power to sustain this realm. In the ensuing exchange, Mankar Cameron demonstrated the full force of his charisma and madness. He taunted the hero, claiming that his reality, this paradise, proved the righteousness of his cause. In his view, Lorcan, the creator of Mundus, had imprisoned all mortals in a flawed world, and the Daedra were their liberators. He spoke as if Tamriel belonged rightfully to Dagon, calling it Dawn's beauty, the princedom of Lorcan in his mythology. Mankar insisted that the hero, by serving the Septims, was a slave to the lies of the divines. He promised that even if the hero struck him down, Dagon's victory was inevitable and that the dawn would break, regardless. The time for talk ended. The final battle in paradise erupted in the throne chamber. Mankar Cameron, imbued with immense power from both the Xerxes' knowledge and the amulet, proved to be one of the most formidable foes the hero ever faced. He levitated above the dais, raining down storms of lightning and fire summoned from Oblivion. With a flick of his hand, he could open mini-portals that disgorged lesser Daedra to aid him momentarily. His children, Raven and Ruma, attacked the hero as well with enchanted blades or spells of their own. The hero, with assistance from Eldamil, had to contend with all of them at once, utilizing every trick learned, potions, enchanted arms, agile footing, to survive the onslaught. The very reality of paradise quaked as magical energies collided. Trees outside wilted and regrew erratically as the realm destabilized from the violence within. In a climactic sequence, the hero managed to cut down Raven and Ruma Cameron both, and then finally engage Mankar in close quarters. Steel met sorcery in a dazzling duel. Mankar, for all his power, was mortal in that moment and could be slain. Blow by blow, the hero pierced Mankar's defenses. With a final strike, the hero's blade found its mark. Mankar Cameron, the master of the Mythic Dawn, gasped as life left him. His body disintegrated in a blaze of unearthly light, and a thunderous boom echoed as the paradise began to unravel. The hero looked toward Eldamil, who began to unravel with the realm. With Mankar's death, the magic-sustaining Gaia Alata faltered. The skies darkened, and the idyllic landscape started to disintegrate, turning into cinders. The surviving inhabitants, cultists and souls, screamed as their promised eternity collapsed around them, possibly being cast back into oblivion or worse. On the ground where Mankar fell lay the Amulet of Kings, gleaming and untainted. The hero snatched it up. In that instant, the hero felt a tug, and in a flash of white light, just as the paradise was collapsing completely, the hero was whisked away. Back at Cloud Ruler Temple, a portal burst open in mid-air, and the hero of Kvatch tumbled through. smoke and sparks swirling behind them. They landed on the solid stone of the courtyard, to the astonishment of Martin and the Blades, who were nervously awaiting some sign. The Amulet of Kings clattered on the ground beside the hero. A moment of silence, then a great cheer went up from the gathered Blades. The hero had returned successful. Martin rushed forward and helped the hero up, his eyes wide at the sight of the red-jeweled amulet. It was as if the soul of the Empire itself had come home. "You've done it!" Martin exclaimed. He held up the Amulet of Kings reverently, its gem catching the torchlight. It was the first time in his life he had touched this sacred relic, and at that moment, those watching said Martin's face bore a striking resemblance to his father's in dignity and resolve. Now the final act of the crisis could begin. Yet there was no time for long celebration. Even as Cloud Ruler's court resounded with relief and praise for the hero, ominous reports were filtering in. More and more Oblivion gates continued to open across Cyrodiil, as if in a frenzy. The Mythic Dawn might have been defeated and their leader dead, but Mehrunes Dagon's invasion was reaching its endgame. The Daedric prince, sensing his pawns failing, perhaps decided to take matters into his own hands. The sky over the Imperial City was reported to have taken on a strange, red hue, like a storm of blood. It was as if all the remaining fury of Oblivion was being concentrated for one last strike at the heart of the Empire. Martin understood what needed to be done. The Amulet of Kings was in his possession, and a Septim heir was alive to wear it. The time had come to fulfill the Dragonfire Covenant. He would go to the Imperial City's Temple of the One, use the amulet to relight the Dragonfires, sealing Oblivion's gates forever, and take his rightful place as Emperor. Preparations were made for immediate departure. The hero of Kvatch and a detachment of Blades would escort Martin straight to the Imperial Palace. Messages were sent ahead to High Chancellor Okato and the Elder Council to expect Martin's arrival. At dawn, the party rode hard for the Imperial City, racing against what they feared the Daedra might attempt in desperation. Martin's entourage arrived at the Imperial City to a scene of turmoil. The sky above was swirling with unnatural clouds, and the rumble of distant thunder rolled overhead. As Martin, the hero, and the Blades entered the Palace District, they found the Imperial City Guard on high alert and the populace in panic, with people either hiding indoors or fleeing through the streets. High Chancellor Okato, the acting head of state since Uriel's death, rushed out to meet Martin on the palace steps. Okato, an Ultima battle mage of great repute, looked astonished at the young man wearing Tiber Septim's armor and bearing the Amulet of Kings. He immediately knelt and acknowledged him. "My lord, the Dragon Throne is yours," Okato said emotionally. He pledged the Elder Council's full support. This brief moment of recognition was significant. It meant Martin had been accepted by the Empire's governing body, clearing any doubt of his legitimacy in the history books. No sooner had Okato begun to formally hail Martin as Emperor, however, than catastrophe struck. A runner came sprinting, shouting that Oblivion gates were opening inside the city walls. In fact, multiple gates tore open across various districts, near simultaneously. A colossal breach of the Dragonfire's old protection, indicating the barrier between worlds was almost completely shattered. From these gates poured Daedra, who had obviously been massing for this moment. In the Temple District, citizens screamed as scamps and clanfears flooded the streets. In the Market District, a hulking Shivali crushed market stalls, while city guards charged valiantly. Even in the Palace District, a gate spewed forth a contingent of Dremora that set upon the white gold tower's very grounds. Then came an even more dire sight. The ground quaked violently, and with a sound like a mountain sliding, the sky itself split open above the Imperial City. Mehrunes Dagon, the Prince of Destruction in all his dreadful glory, was forcing his own passage into Nirn. Unlike the controlled gateways that had let smaller portions of his power through, now the Daedric prince was physically manifesting. As the clouds parted in a vortex of fire, a giant four-armed figure began to step through a titanic portal above the temple district. Mehrunes Dagon's true form, a crimson-skinned giant towering over buildings, with a crown of horns and a snarling visage, descended with each thunderous footfall. His bellow shook the entire city, a mix of rage and triumph. The sight was terrifying. At roughly 200 feet tall, Dagon waded through the city, crushing homes and ramparts underfoot without effort. With the protective barriers ruined, the Prince of Change had decided to claim Tamriel personally. For a moment, despair seized the defenders. How could mere mortals stand against a Daedric prince incarnate? Many Imperial citizens who witnessed Dagon's arrival collapsed in fear or prayed to the divines for a miracle. The Elder Council's battle mages flung spells at Dagon, but they sizzled harmlessly on his armored hide. The city's only hope lay in Martin Septim and the Amulet of Kings. If he could reach the Temple of the One and relight the dragonfires, perhaps the divines would intervene. Understanding this with crystal clarity, Martin snapped into action. "To the Temple of the One! We must relight the dragonfires now," he commanded. The hero of Kvatch and the remaining blades closed protectively around Martin, and together they began a frantic charge towards the temple district. Chancellor Okato and a handful of surviving palace guards tried to join or provide cover. The streets were chaos. Daedra versus guards in every direction. Buildings aflame. Citizens running. The Temple of the One, where the Dragonfire's altar lay, was only a short distance, but Mehrunes Dagon himself stood between Martin and the temple. The giant prince, seeing the commotion, recognized Martin and the amulet. The amulet's power and dragonborn aura likely shone to his Daedric senses. Dagon roared and swatted aside a tower, stepping directly into the temple district to cut them off. At the temple district gates, Martin's party was confronted by an awe-inspiring sight. Mehrunes Dagon looming directly ahead, amidst the rubble of what had been elegant plazas. The hero and blades engaged any Daedra that charged, while Dagon himself swung a massive axe, demolishing an entire chapel in one blow, trying to reach Martin. The force of Dagon's presence was so overwhelming that some in Martin's escort faltered, but the hero of Kvatch stood by Martin, steadying him physically at one point when a shockwave from Dagon's stomp nearly threw him. Martin straightened, clutching the Amulet of Kings around his neck, and resolved to make it past the prince. He turned to the hero, and with surprising calm in his eyes, amidst the chaos, said, "I know what I must do. I must reach the dragonfires, no matter the cost." With Dagon blocking the way, and no time to find a path around, Martin made a fateful decision. He realized that simply lighting the dragonfires in the usual manner might no longer banish Dagon. The barrier was fully sundered by now, but there was another way, a final option hinted in old prophecy: sacrifice and summoning Akatosh. In that split second, Martin decided to use the Amulet of Kings in a far more drastic way than intended. He looked to the hero of Kvatch with gratitude and sorrow. "I thank you, friend, for all you have done," Martin said. "But now I must do what only a Septim can. We must trust to the Nine and to the dragon god of time." The hero had no chance to protest. Perhaps they understood what was about to happen, or perhaps not. But Martin gave them a reassuring nod. With that, Martin suddenly broke into a sprint, straight towards the Temple of the One, which lay just beyond Dagon's reach for the moment. The hero and a few remaining blades cleared the path of lesser Daedra as Martin ran. Mehrunes Dagon saw Martin making for the temple and raised his foot to stomp down, but was momentarily distracted by an onslaught of spells from a unit of Imperial battle mages. Martin, escorted by the hero, dashed up the steps of the Temple of the One, and vanished inside its great bronze doors. An invisible barrier, perhaps Akatosh's intervention or the amulet's magic, sealed the doors behind them, leaving the others outside to witness what came next through shattered openings in the temple wall. Inside the Temple of the One, the hero watched as Martin Septim stood alone before the altar that once bore the dragonfires. He could hear and feel Dagon's massive presence right outside. Parts of the temple's dome had already cracked from Dagon's earlier rampage. Mehrunes Dagon smashed his fist down onto the temple roof, causing it to collapse inward, revealing Martin standing below. The Daedric prince's colossal form loomed over the broken temple walls. He sneered, raising a foot to obliterate Martin. But Martin held aloft the Amulet of Kings and in a firm voice called out a prayer to Akatosh, the dragon god of time. In that moment, Martin shattered the Amulet of Kings against the altar, an act of self-sacrifice and a release of divine energy. The amulet, symbol of the covenant, fused with Martin's very soul and the blood of Akatosh within him. There was a blinding golden flash. Those outside saw the entire Temple of the One explode with light. From within the burst of radiance came a gigantic golden dragon, the avatar of Akatosh himself, summoned into the world by Martin's sacrifice. Martin's mortal form was gone. In his place, the spirit of Akatosh in dragon form took to the air, coiling around the temple's ruins. This divine dragon was an awe-inspiring sight, made of searing holy fire, yet distinctly draconic with vast wings and burning eyes. Its appearance was greeted by an ethereal peal, like a deep bell or a choir. Mehrunes Dagon roared in fury and perhaps shock. The dragon god of time, one of the 8 divines, had entered the fray to defend Mundus. What followed was an epic confrontation witnessed by every survivor in the imperial city. The avatar of Akatosh lunged at Dagon, and the 2 titans clashed in the heart of the imperial city. The ground quaked with each blow. Dagon swung his massive weapons. The dragon raked and bit with claws and fangs of celestial fire. The first moments of battle knocked over the remaining temple district walls. Dagon managed to cleave into the dragon's shoulder, causing golden flame blood to spill, but Akatosh retaliated with a wrathful swipe that tore one of Dagon's 4 arms clean off, dispersing it into smoke. Dagon howled. He grappled the dragon, trying to crush it, but the avatar of Akatosh reared back and unleashed a mighty flame breath. Holy dragonfire, directly into Mehrunes Dagon's face. The Daedric prince was engulfed by the searing light. He staggered, his form beginning to destabilize under the divine onslaught. In that decisive moment, the dragon seized at Dagon, giving a thunderous roar, and with a final colossal effort, hurled Mehrunes Dagon back through the Oblivion gate he had come through. Dagon's physical form disintegrated, banished from Nirn utterly by the dragon god's power. As Dagon vanished, every remaining Oblivion gate across Tamriel suddenly closed, their anchors severed. The skies cleared as if a storm had passed. The avatar of Akatosh, having fulfilled its purpose, settled back within the ruined Temple of the One. The great dragon gave a final triumphant roar that echoed across the city, then slowly turned into solid stone, becoming a vast, petrified statue of a dragon coiled around the temple's altar. The divine spirit departed, and with it went Martin Septim's life force. All that remained was the stone dragon, an eternal monument to Martin's sacrifice, and a symbol that Akatosh's covenant had been restored. The Oblivion Crisis was over. In that instant of Akatosh's victory, the mystical barriers between Oblivion and Mundus were restored. In fact, made even stronger. Every Oblivion gate winked out of existence, and Mehrunes Dagon was banished from the mortal realm. The survivors, soldiers, civilians, everyone present, emerged from their hiding places and beheld the dragon statue in awe. They realized they had witnessed a divine miracle, and that Martin Septim, their savior, was gone. The hero of Kvatch, standing amidst the rubble and ash, understood first what had transpired. Martin had sacrificed himself utterly to summon Akatosh and save the world. In the immediate aftermath, a stunned silence fell over the imperial city. Gradually, cries of victory and grief mingled as people emerged to count both their blessings and their losses. The enemy was gone, but so was Martin Septim, the last heir of the Septim line. High Chancellor Okato and the Elder Council gathered around the hero of Kvatch amid the smoking ruins of the temple district. In front of the still glowing stone dragon, Okato addressed those present, declaring the hero of Kvatch as the champion of Cyrodiil for their instrumental role in saving the realm. It was acknowledged that without the hero's courage and Martin's sacrifice, Tamriel would have been lost. Okato and the council also confirmed the sad truth. With Martin's passing and the Amulet of Kings destroyed, there would be no more dragonborn emperors. The Third Era had truly come to its end. Yet, though the throne of Cyrodiil was now empty, the dire need for an emperor had also passed. The Oblivion gates were sealed forever. The covenants rekindled by Martin and Akatosh ensured that no Daedric prince could directly invade Nirn in such a manner again, at least as long as Akatosh's blessing endured. In one sense, Martin's death marked the end of an era. In another, it was the salvation of the world. The people began to regard Martin Septim with reverence akin to sainthood. The Temple of the One's ruins, with the colossal dragon statue entwined, stood as a lasting testament. Many would come to that site to leave flowers or pray in the years to follow, honoring the divine intervention and the sacrifice behind it. Politically, the empire had to reckon with the fallout. The Septim dynasty was no more, which plunged the empire into an interregnum. The Elder Council, under Okato's leadership, took charge of governing for some time. They eventually bestowed the title of Champion of Cyrodiil on the hero formally, and many honors besides, including a place in the newly formed Order of the Dragon, if some accounts are to be believed. But the loss of the Dragonblood line caused a crisis of legitimacy. Within a decade, a cunning Colovian warlord named Titus Mede would seize the imperial city and crown himself emperor, beginning the Mede dynasty. Until then, the provinces, already strained by the crisis, became fractious. The Oblivion Crisis left scars both literal and figurative across Tamriel. The city of Kvatch remained a smoking ruin long after, never fully rebuilt in the same glory even by the Fourth Era. It stood as a stark reminder of how suddenly devastation could befall even a great city. Many smaller settlements and forts in Cyrodiil also lay in ruins from gate-related skirmishes. There were psychological scars too. An entire generation had witnessed the sky torn open and demons pouring out. Such trauma was not soon forgotten. Yet from these scars also rose new heroes and cautionary tales that would fortify Tamriel's peoples against future evils. Every culture in Tamriel developed its own recollection and legends of the crisis. The Imperials, of course, told and retold the tale of Martin Septim's noble sacrifice. Songs like The Last Dragonblood were sung in taverns, and the story was recorded in volumes such as The Trials of Saint Martin. Statues of Martin, and even of the hero of Kvatch, were erected in the imperial city and other places to commemorate their deeds. In Skyrim, Nords composed ballads of their countrymen who fought at the Battle of Bruma, and of their own struggles holding back Daedra that appeared in the old holds of the north. While details vary, it's known that Skyrim did see its share of gates, and that the hardy Nords took great pride in fighting them off, later crediting Talos, their beloved Aesmir Tiber Septim, for granting Martin the strength to prevail. In Morrowind, the Dunmer had paid dearly during the crisis. The fall of Aldrun became a somber tale, often recounted by House Redoran. how their once great capital on Vardenfell was obliterated by Daedra, despite the Redoran summoning their old Emperor Crabshell, Scar, to protect it. The epic story of Scar's awakening and its last stand, though ending in tragedy, became an ode to Redoran valor. Additionally, the siege of Ghostgate was remembered. The Daedra, after taking Aldrun, swarmed the Ghost Fence at Red Mountain. Some sources say the resident buoyant armigers and temple warriors held the line at Ghostgate just long enough until the crisis ended, preventing the Daedra from freely roaming the heart of Vardenfell. Regardless, Morrowind emerged weakened. House Redoran was decimated, and the Tribunal Temple's waning authority was given a final blow by these events. This vacuum later allowed the rise of the worship of the New Temple, the Reclamations, and also left Morrowind vulnerable to the catastrophe that struck a decade later, the eruption of Red Mountain in the Red Year, 405. Black Marsh fared intriguingly well in the crisis. The Argonians, guided by the Hist, sensed the coming danger earlier than others. According to their accounts, particularly those of the nationalist faction Enzilil, the Hist trees called many Argonians back from abroad just before the gates opened. When Dagon's forces entered Black Marsh, they met not scattered tribes, but a unified army of Argonian warriors, whose ferocity shocked the Daedra. The Argonians not only defended their swamps, they went on the offensive, reportedly charging into Oblivion Gates to attack the Deadlands itself. The Daedra, unprepared for such a counter-invasion on their turf, were forced to close their own gates to stop the Argonian assault. This incredible feat became known as the Miracle of Black Marsh. Black Marsh emerged largely unscathed, and, emboldened by their success and the Empire's distraction, the Argonians soon after seceded from the Empire entirely, with the Unzilil establishing independence in the early Fourth Era. Elsewhere and Valenwood also saw Oblivion Gates, though historical records are sparser. It is said in Elsewhere that the two moons, Joan and Jode, were absent, hidden by the smoke of Dagon's rage, for some nights. A bad omen. But the Khajiit clans banded together to defend the sacred moon temples from Daedra. In Valenwood, the Bosma, no strangers to Daedric trickery in their wild forests, purportedly invoked the Green Pact in creative ways to combat the invasions. Some stories claim that the forest itself came alive to strangle invading Daedra, possibly through the wild hunt or lesser nature spirits defending their home. Valenwood's isolated tribes and the ongoing Thalmor insurgency, as the Thalmor were starting to gain influence around this time, meant that detailed accounts are few. However, we do know the Crystal Tower's fall in Somerset indirectly helped the Thalmor claim credit for ending the crisis in Somerset. So similarly, in Valenwood, the Thalmor likely positioned themselves as protectors against the Daedra, boosting their popularity for the eventual coup. Somerset Isles, Alinor, suffered one of the worst calamities in its history during the crisis. As mentioned, Daedra overran much of Somerset. The famed Crystal Tower, a monument of the High Elves' power and one of the mystical towers stabilizing Mundus, was besieged by hordes of Daedra. Refugees from all over Somerset crowded into the Crystal Tower's vicinity for protection, but it became the site of a final stand. After days of surrounding the tower, the Daedra launched a massacre. The Crystal Tower fell, its soaring spire toppled, and its defenders slaughtered to the last mage. The collapse of crystal-like lore sent shockwaves metaphysical and literal. The Altmer refer to this period as the Great Anguish, and it deeply humiliated them that their pride, the tower, could be destroyed. However, from the ashes of that tragedy rose the Thalmor. They were a fringe political faction before, but during the chaos of the Daedric invasion, the Thalmor organized relief efforts and militant resistance, which they claimed saved many lives. After the crisis, the Thalmor propaganda machine took full advantage. They asserted that it was their intervention, not the Septim Empire, which they said had failed to protect Somerset, that ended the Daedric onslaught. In truth, it was Martin's victory that ended it, but the Somerset people, bitter and mourning, found the Thalmor's message appealing. Thus, the Oblivion Crisis directly propelled the Thalmor to power in Somerset, culminating in their coup and the formation of the Third Aldmeri Dominion in the Fourth Era. Hammerfell and High Rock faced their own Daedric incursions as well. In Hammerfell, Redguard honour and martial prowess were on full display. Hammerfell's experience with constant warfare against the Cameron usurper and others made its people fiercely effective at defending their lands. Accordingly, Hammerfell survived with relatively fewer scars. As the dust settled, Tamriel entered the Fourth Era. The lessons of the Oblivion Crisis were profound. One immediate result was an increased reverence for the divine in many quarters, especially Akatosh. The events also reaffirmed the ancient covenant. Even without a dragonborn emperor, Akatosh had not abandoned mankind. For the Empire, though, the challenges were only beginning. The heart of the Empire, Cyrodiil, was left intact, but politically shaken without a dynasty. As noted, Titus Mede would eventually take the throne by force. Meanwhile, Blackmarsh's secession and Somerset's secession, under the Thalmor, who would rebrand it Alinor, marked the fracture of the Empire. Hammerfell and High Rock remained, but Morrowind, devastated and soon hammered further by the eruption of Red Mountain and an Argonian invasion in revenge for centuries of Dunmer slavery, would also drift out of the imperial ambit. In a way, the Oblivion Crisis presaged the decline of centralized imperial power and a return to fragmented political states, which set the stage for conflicts to come, like the Great War with the Thalmor a couple of centuries later. And yet, the Oblivion Crisis also imparted an inspiring legacy of unity in the face of annihilation. At the peak of the crisis, men and Mea stood together. The Battle of Bruma proved that differences could be set aside for a common cause. The heroes of this age became legends told for generations. The hero of Kvatch, though their name, race, and fate after the crisis are lost to history, some speculate they even ascended to mantling Sheogorath in the Shivering Isles, but that's another tale. Martin Septim, last of the Dragonborn emperors who became the literal saviour of the world, Joffrey, Borus, and the Blades who gave their lives to protect the air, and many unsung soldiers from every province who stood and fought. The phrase, "close shut the jaws of oblivion," Uriel's final command, entered the common lexicon as a call to arms against desperate odds, a rallying cry for Tamriel in its darkest hours. Each province added the crisis to their calendar of holy days or remembrances. In Cyrodiil, the Temple of the One's Ruin became a pilgrimage site, where every year, on the anniversaries of Martin's birth and death, people light dragon-shaped candles and sing praises to Akatosh and the fallen emperor. The red dragon crown of the Empire, the symbol of the Septims, was lost with Martin. But the red dragon itself, Akatosh, became even more deeply ingrained as the Empire's divine protector in the minds of the people. The Elder Council, after initial chaos, managed to keep the Empire functional during the transition. Okato would serve as potentate for a time, though he too met a violent end eventually, assassinated as competing successors jockeyed for the throne. In the provinces, both Somerset and Blackmarsh's departures can be seen as direct outcomes of the power vacuum and differing interpretations of the crisis. The Thalmor in Somerset propagandized that the Altmer had saved themselves, even twisting some narratives to claim credit for banishing Dagon, which is spurious. While in Black Marsh, the Anzilil used their people's success to justify complete independence, saying the Empire's aid was unnecessary. In the broader view of history, the Oblivion Crisis is often cited as the event that ended the Third Era, officially marked as Third Era 433, with Martin's sacrifice occurring on the last day of that era, and ushered in the Fourth Era. It fundamentally altered Tamriel's political landscape and consciousness. No event like it had occurred since perhaps the Alessian slave rebellion or the disappearance of the dwarves. It was mythic in scope, something people would talk about not just as history, but almost as religion or legend. Looking ahead, the Oblivion Crisis set the stage for many of the Fourth Era's defining struggles. With the Empire's weakening, the Thalmor's rise led to the Great War. Fourth Era, 171 to 175, where the Empire and the Aldmeri Dominion clashed. A conflict arguably rooted in the chaos and power shifts post-crisis. The Dunmer, having lost much in the crisis, would, in a sense, lose their national identity when Red Mountain's eruption and the Argonian invasion forced them into exile. Many Dunmer fled to Skyrim, leading to new conflicts there. The Argonians, empowered by their success, reclaimed their identity and sovereignty. Skyrim, 2 centuries later, would invoke the memory of Martin's sacrifice when deciding whether to stay in the Empire or break away in the Stormcloak Rebellion. Some Nords argued that, without a Dragonborn on the throne, the Empire had lost its mandate. Ironic, given one would later emerge in Skyrim itself in the person of the last Dragonborn. In the end, the Oblivion Crisis remains a cautionary tale of mortal folly, the Mythic Dawn's treason, born of Mankar's madness and Daedric promises, and mortal heroism, the unity of Tamriel's people and the selflessness of Martin and the hero. It illustrates the delicate balance of the Mundus, how the covenants and wards set by the gods, like the dragonfires, are vital, and what can happen when they falter. It shows that even when the jaws of oblivion gape wide to devour the world, the courage of mortals and the grace of the divines can join to turn the tide. This theme resonates through the ages. In every subsequent crisis Tamriel faces, people recall the Oblivion Crisis as proof that no matter how dire things seem, mortal heroes, alongside divine aid, can save the world. As we conclude this extensive chronicle, we reflect on the enduring lesson of the Oblivion Crisis. Tamriel faced its darkest hour. Literally, the gates of hell opened on all sides. And yet, it was ultimately mortal courage and divine sacrifice that won the day. An emperor gave himself so that his people could live, and a lone hero answered the call to rally kings and shut the jaws of oblivion. The peoples of Tamriel, though scarred by this great anguish, endured and found strength in unity and faith. The crisis, in ending the Third Era, became ironically a dawn of a new era. Not the Mythic Dawn the cultists wanted through destruction, but an era in which men and Myr would have to redefine their future and find hope without the guidance of dragonborn emperors. In the Fourth Era to come, the memory of the crisis, the alliances formed, the bravery shown, and the sacrifices made, would inspire new generations to protect the world whenever the flames of oblivion threaten to rise again. And now, dear traveller, our journey draws gently to its close. I hope this tale of courage, sacrifice, and renewal has provided insight as much as comfort on this quiet night. May the memory of those who stood bravely at Tamriel's darkest hour accompany you into restful slumber, and may their stories guide you through dreams rich with adventure and peace. Until next, we meet by firelight and starlight. Sleep well, and may your own path always lead safely back here, to our shared sanctuary of stories.